Welcome to the September 13th, 2018 regularly scheduled meeting of the Oklahoma City Planning Commission. We have a lot of little loose ends this morning that this afternoon that we're trying to tie up here. If you have a cell phone with you, now would be a really good time to shut it off. I'm going to shut mine off. If you have an item that you wish to be heard on today, there are some sign-up sheets out on the desk out in the hallway. If you would fill one out, it would help us kind of keep things straight up here as we go along. How this works, for any of you who may not do this all the time, we have a few little things here at the beginning that we'll take care of, and then as we call each case to be heard, we'll ask the applicant to come forward, give us their name and address, explain to us what it is they're asking for. Commission may have questions of them. There may be some discussion. If there are persons who wish to be heard either in support or opposition to the application, we'll ask those persons to come forward. Same thing, give us their name and address, tell us what their questions and concerns are. All of those comments should be addressed to the commission and not to other members of the parties participating. And then there'll be questions and by the commissioners, if at all. There may be some further discussion among the commissioners, and then we'll vote on each item in turn. The first item on the agenda is the receipt of minutes from the August 23rd, 2018 meeting.
Motion to receive.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to receive the minutes of the August 23rd, 2018 meeting. Would you cast your votes, please? They are received. And it looks like our IT person is on the job. Thank you. The next item is continuance requests.
Yes, we have 4 uncontested requests for continuance. On your agenda, it would be item B9, which is case CE 975, to defer that case to October 11th. Item B17 on the agenda for case PUD 1680 to defer to September 27th. Item B18 for case PUD 1693 to defer to September 27th. And item B19 for case PUD 1686 also to September 27th.
Is there anyone here today who wanted to be, I see there is, Sally Henderson wanted to be heard on item number 17. Would you come forward? What we're proposing to do is continue this case until September 27th.
Yes. I'm Sally Henderson, and am I supposed to give my address?
Would you please?
6701 East Britton Road. I'm the property immediately east of the property in question.
Okay.
And I believe this is the 4th deferral. And I have the question of, is this a mechanism that people use to reduce the number of protesting people in the audience?
Sometimes. We try not to let them do that. Let me look and see if you're right about the number of continuances.
Certainly, I wish it was deferred for 20 years or so until I wouldn't have to worry about it. But I'd like to know what the deal is.
Mark, would you like to come up and talk to us about that? We'll see if we can get you an answer.
Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates here on behalf of the applicant. That particular application we've met with staff several different times regarding the amendment or plan change because that's urban reserve property. And there's been discussion about the need to extend sewer and water, and we took the continuances because we've been in conversation with the property owner to the west to try and get easements. And just of late, they've advised us that they're not interested in moving on. So we have continued this again so that we can come back with our original plan to amend the OKC plan and do large lot development here, which is more applicable to the surrounding neighborhoods.
And how comfortable do you feel that you're going to be ready to do that by September 27th?
Not very.
Okay.
I think we need to continue it to the first meeting in October.
Would that be agreeable to you
Yes, ma'am.
if we tell you we're going to hear this at the first meeting?
In October of like 2030, but yes, I just being smart aleck, sorry.
No, I don't blame you a bit. Okay, in this particular case, I'm relatively satisfied that this is not just a delaying tactic to whittle down opposition. So we're going to hear this, the first meeting in October.
I would very much like to go on record as saying it's extremely nerve-wracking.
I totally understand. I really do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Ma'am, has the applicant been in contact with you all, the neighbors concerned, and given you guys a chance to meet and discuss it and everything?
No.
Okay.
We've never made it that far because of the discussions about the plan change.
But you intend to do that before, so...
We have expressed our intent to meet, and I have never been called or invited. There is one other family living on the 80 acres that I own, and I believe that the gentleman who lives there has spoken with some of the people. I don't know them. I don't know who has contacted anyone. I, on the other hand, am the owner, and I have never been contacted by anyone.
We have not had any kind of formal meeting regarding this project.
But you plan to do that before October the 11th?
Would have been nice to have done that maybe a year ago, too, wouldn't it?
Ms. Henderson, this gentleman right here is going to give you his contact information. And if you don't hear from him shortly about that meeting, call him and he'll respond.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, so that's it on the items for uncontested continuance. You were standing, ma'am. Was there something that you wanted to tell me?
Yes, I would like to request a continuance on PUDs.
We're not there yet.
Okay.
So on the uncontested continuances, items 9, 17, 18, and 19, do I have a motion?
Make a motion to continue the items, altering item 17 to October 11th, 2018.
I will second.
I have a motion and a second to continue items 9, 17, 18, and 19. Would you cast your votes, please? They are continued.
We've also received several new requests for continuance for item B10 on the agenda for case PUD 1694 to defer that case to September 27th, and for item B14 on the agenda for SPUD 1076, also to September 27th, and for case B15 on the agenda, SPUD 1064, moving that to December 13th.
Is there anyone present who wished to be heard on any of those items today? Sir, would you come forward?
My name is David Castle. My address is 920 Southwest 38th Street in Moore, and I'm here to speak on SPUD 1076. I was prepared to make a statement today, but since it's been deferred, I have a written copy if I want me to leave that for your consideration or read it today, or I would like to protest this request. So since it's being continued, what would you like for me to do?
Well, I'll leave it a little bit up to you. It will be heard on what date? I'm sorry?
27?
September 27th. If it's convenient for you to return, we'd love to have you do that.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure, if you wanted this to look at beforehand,
That would be lovely if you would give it to...
I give that to this lady?
That'd be lovely.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you for your consideration.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for coming.
Sir, also, the gentleman outside from the previous case, they would be a good contact for this one as well. Their names are on there, just in case.
Okay, so do I have a motion? No, I don't have a motion yet. I need a motion.
I'll make a motion to continue the items as read.
Second.
I have a motion to continue items 10, 14, and 15. Cast your votes, please. Those items are continued. Now, we're at the place where we're going to ask if there's anyone else who would like to request a continuance.
I would. My name is Carrie Hewlett. I live at 4670 North Willard Avenue, and I would like to ask that PUD 1670 be continued. I understand from the head of zoning that even though we do not have a Ward 7 planning commissioner, you have the authority to hear anytime there's a quorum. But we in Thompson Woodlands Burr Oaks Neighborhood Association are requesting that you continue this. This is not a normal application.
Before you launch, we are not in a position to continue this case without the consent of the applicant. So we'll ask the applicant now whether they're in agreement with our request for, your request for continuance.
We're not.
So we'll hear this item in order, and I'd ask you to come forward and speak at that time.
Okay, can I ask why you can't continue it unless the applicant approves?
Would you like to speak to that for us?
Oh, me? Yes. I thought you were looking at David. If a planning commissioner is absent from the commission during a vote for something that's in their ward, this body has the ability to hear that case. If the application is complete, the applicant has presented anything for consideration, staff is required to docket that case to be heard. So the planning commission has the ability to request a continuance for lack of information, changes that need modification, additional work that's needed. If everything is there and present and ready to be heard, the commission, this body, can hear a case if they have a quorum. And the fact that that specific planning commissioner who represents the ward that the case is in is not one of the criteria that makes the case ineligible to be heard.
Okay, I understand that you have the authority, but do you not also have the authority to grant a continuance, even if the applicant doesn't agree?
With respect to the authority, I'll defer to our legal counsel. It is not our practice to do so.
Okay, I understand practice, but I'm talking...
They have the authority to do that, but in this case, since there's not going to be a planning commissioner appointed until after the 1st of November, it's somewhat unreasonable to defer all the cases. As a matter of fact, we have 2 commission seats that are vacant right now, and I think it would be unreasonable to continue those until a planning commissioner is appointed.
Well, I have some reasons that I think in this particular case it might be appropriate. But I would like to go ahead and, because I understand you have the authority, even if the applicant does not agree. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we'll hear you when we hear this item in its rotation. We won't take action on your request at this point. Luckily, it's kind of a short agenda today. You won't be sitting on those hard benches very long. Mr. Groves?
I'd like to be heard on this. Are you telling me that I should wait until the item comes up?
Yes. Okay, so we have items on the agenda that we call the consent agenda. So there are items that do require a vote, but they are relatively routine items. I don't know whether there's anybody signed up to be heard on any of these, but we'll read them and we'll see.
Okay, there are 7 items on the consent docket, and I will read them for the record. Number 1 is case BC 10-545 to rezone 807 Northwest 69th from R1 to I2. Item 2 is case PC 10-546 to rezone 1630 Northwest 1st from R2 to I2. Item 3 is case C 7022, the final plat of Remington Park Town Center. Item 4 is case C 7023, the final plat of Coeur d'Alene, Phase 1. Item 5 is case C 7024, the final plat of Northwest 10th Street, Schlotzsky's. Item 6 is case C 7025, the final plat of Deer Valley Estates, Phase 2. And item 7 is case C 7028, the final plat of Ledgestone, Phase 2.
Is there anyone present who wished to be heard on any of those items today? I have a sign-up sheet from, is it Carrie Barger?
Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Kerry Barger. I reside at 11648 Southwest 54th in Mustang, Oklahoma.
So you have a presentation you wish to give us about this item?
Just some comments. I felt it was necessary to be here and voice some concerns in front of the committee.
Okay.
It's
Give me a
done
minute,
before.
if you would, please.
All right?
Commission, I'd like to take a vote on the other consent agenda items, and then we'll come back to you.
All right.
The item that he's here to speak on was...
Number 7.
Okay.
I motion to approve consent docket, sans item number 7.
I have a motion and a second to approve items number 1 through 6. Would you cast your votes, please? Those are approved. Now, I'm sorry, Mr. Barger, where'd you go? Come back, please. Would you read item number 7 for us again?
So item number 7 will be heard individually for case C-7028, the final plat of Ledgestone Phase 2.
All right, thank you. I'm the president.
Is the applicant present on this?
Is the applicant present? Would you like to be heard first?
Mark Grubbs, Grubbs Consulting, 1819 South Morgan Road, on behalf of the applicant. The case you have before you today is the second phase of Ledgestone. It is the final plat for the remainder of the preliminary plat. It conforms to the preliminary plat. We agree to the TEs. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Barger, I'm sorry.
Okay. As I started to say, I'm president of the Thoroughbred Acres Association there. So I represent, to some extent, the neighbors and constituents there in the development adjacent to this property. And our concern, of course, is not in regards to the progress of building houses in the area. But one concern that we had with the first development was there was an increase in water flow directly in front of our entrance, and we have only one entrance into our neighborhood. And it was quite difficult to enter at times when that rainflow was heavy there. If they have some course of action to show that they are able to control or reduce the amount of water flow across that entrance, that would be certainly appreciated. So the second concern that I have is directed towards the amount of density. The first half brought in 85 or 88 homes at that time, and the second portion now is bringing in, I understand, 95 new homes into the area, so increasing the density in that area. And with two entrances, it appears that it's going to obviously impact the traffic in and around our area. The third concern that I have is there is a portion towards the back half of this property, and it appears, I know for a fact that that is a creek and wooded area, and we're concerned about the development of that and what the plans are for that area. So if they could speak to that, that would help understand if this area is to be developed into the future, and if so, is it something that has access for emergency vehicles or fire facilities to take care of the wooded area, because we did suffer a fire at one time, not at the result of this development, but a grass fire that came in and came across that property towards us. So we're a little concerned about the control of wooded areas if that's to remain that way. So that's all I have.
Mr. Grubbs, did you want to speak to his issues?
Concerning the drainage, this is not a detention required area, but when we addressed the preliminary plat, we agreed to provide detention for this phase, which drains west into the creek. We have designed that and submitted it for the engineering department's review, As far as the entrance goes off Mustang Road, you can see we also provided 2 detention ponds on the east, at that east entrance. Concerning traffic,
Can I ask you, are you confident that they're sufficient?
Well, we actually didn't agree to, the city said detention wasn't required in the beginning. When we looked at those detention ponds, we actually looked at them with the drainage structure that's under Mustang Road. So we looked at the capacity of the drainage structure under Mustang Road, which is an ODOT highway, and we designed the detention ponds around those. Am I confident that this does not increase the runoff in that area? It wasn't designed not to. Detention is not required. The west side, we agreed to provide detention because it was brought up that there was flooding at the northwest corner of our addition, so we agreed to provide detention in that area.
So what use will be made of the creek area?
Well, they're going to clean that area up, looking at some walking trails, putting playground and stuff back in that area, but there will also be a detention pond back in that area before it releases into that creek.
So that strip that he's referring to, that will not be developed?
The large, approximately 11-acre street that he's referring to will not be developed.
Okay, thank you.
And they'll clean those trees up, so it'll be better than the woods are now that they're sitting next to.
Okay. And you are required and do provide 2 access points, 2 points of access.
Based on the subregs, and we meet that.
Okay. Does that help?
It does help. We're satisfied that they'll do a nice job. They've done pretty well so far. I will say that the retention ponds at the front are never full, so somehow that didn't get incorporated, and it does, before it enters the drainage, which is just adjacent to our entrance at the top, the flow of water was so heavy that it brought in quite a bit of soil during the development. Now, that soil has been reduced, so we're satisfied that that's not going to be a repeat problem, but the water flow was increased, and we're a little concerned that the development, higher density, more homes, is going to bring a different result and may increase the water flow. But I understand the water retention. If it works, great, we'll applaud the development, and if not, then we'll be back here once again.
As to the density, the density of the plat that they're presenting here today is in compliance with the zoning that they have, so they're not exceeding what's allowed.
Agreed. Back to the area with walking trails, I guess, we don't see any access or direct access for anyone that might be exposed to some hazard or health issues. How would they get back there to assist people there? Has that been considered?
Is that emergency vehicle access to the creek area?
Yeah, plus medical assistance. If you have a playground or walk areas and someone becomes ill, how would you get emergency vehicles back to that area? Is that unusual or is that acceptable? It doesn't appear on this plat that there's really a good way to get back there to that area.
I show only pedestrian access between lots 1 and, is it 27? I should put my glasses on.
Yeah, we provide pedestrian access to the common area to the west. Otherwise, they could enter through that pedestrian access. A vehicle obviously will not be able to get back there, but it's pretty much the same condition as it is now. They would either have to come off 59th Street and enter that if they needed the vehicular access.
And my sense is that that's not unusual. Is it, JJ? Is that unusual? No, I don't think so. It's not unusual.
Is there also in compliance with fire vehicles being able to get through there with the houses blocking that area? I'm not sure how they would get in there to fight a grass fire. And is that being considered? We're not experts in this area. We're just asking.
I totally get that. Do you know where your hydrants will go at this point?
They're spaced adequately on the streets.
So they would have to go, from hydrants down between the homes
Okay.
to lay hose, I assume.
Okay. I believe that answers our concerns.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you for
Appreciate
hearing.
it.
Aye.
Mark, not putting the park in the middle of the,
I'm
are
sorry.
you putting the park in the middle of the detention pond?
No, park's not going in the middle of the detention pond.
I just had some experience with that. Curious. Sounded very smart.
We'll have to hear that story sometime. Commissioners, do we have any other questions of the applicant or our visitor? I don't want to call him a protestant. No? Can I have a motion?
I move for approval of item number 7 on the consent docket.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 7. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Okay, item 8 on your agenda is for case DA 25483. It's a lot split deed approval at 2201 West I-240 Service Road. It does require a variance to the subdivision regulations.
The applicant, I'm sorry.
Are you Alec Bass with Wallace Engineering, representing the applicant? This site was currently a lease lot within an existing shopping center and operated as a restaurant. That restaurant has since closed, been vacant and demolished. My client wishes to construct a new restaurant on the site. However, financing requires that they actually own the property rather than leasing it. After coordinating with city staff, together we determined this application to be the best course of action. So thank you for your time. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, I did have a question about this with respect to whether, by doing this through a lot split process as opposed to, having required a plat, whether there was anything we were losing by way of the things that we usually hold people up for at this process. But they have all the easements they need. They've got the, utilities in place and so on and so forth. So in this particular instance, the answer to that question is no, for anybody else who's curious about it. Do we have any questions, comments? Is there anybody else here who wants to be heard today on this item? No?
What would be the alternative to a lot split here? What would be
They would have had to have platted originally.
So they'd have to go back and, okay, that's, yeah. Okay.
And, sometimes that can be problematic, but in this case, it's not. So we have a variance requested in this case.
I'll make a motion to approve the variance to section 3.4.4 C2 sub F of the subdivision regulations.
I have a motion and a second to approve a variance to this item. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you for your time.
I'll take a motion on the item.
Make a motion to approve the lot split deed approval for DA 25483.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 8, DA 25483. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
All right. Thank you again.
Case number 9 and item 9 and 10 on your agenda were continued. So item 11 is C7008, the preliminary plat of Britton Farms.
Good afternoon. Kendall Dillon with Craft and Toll representing the applicant. This is an 80-acre tract that lies about a quarter of a mile to the west of County Line Road on the south side of Britton. It's currently zoned R1 single family. Obviously, an application for a preliminary plat. I think we're proposing 315 lots, yields a gross density of about 3.9 dwelling units per acre. The plat is in complete conformance and compliance with both your zoning ordinance and your subdivision regulations. Have 3 standard TEs, and so we'd ask for your approval.
Mr. Dillon, I had some question after looking at this exhibit about your stub to the south.
Okay.
Is the property to the south not yet developed?
It is not currently developed. It is in an approved preliminary plat of Creston Ridge, I believe. I've actually met with their engineer as well, and they, even though it doesn't appear to show up on your staff report, the preliminary plat that I've seen has a stub from them, so we'll line up and connect. So there will be a stub to the south.
Okay, great. Commissioners, do we have any questions of Mr. Dillon?
Do we need to add the stub as a TE?
Well, I have a stub on my plat.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Has it between lots 22 and 36?
22 and 36?
Correct.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Thanks. All right.
Is there anyone else here who wishes to be heard on this item today? No? Commissioners?
I'll move approval of item number 11.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 11, C7008. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item 12 is case C7019, the preliminary plat of Sienna Ridge.
Good afternoon, Brad Reed with Craft and Toll, here on behalf of the applicant. This is a preliminary plat for a subdivision at 44th and Morgan, 159 single-family lots on 40 acres, 4 dwelling units per acre. We are in compliance with the zoning and the subdivision regulations. There are a few staff TEs that I would like to discuss. We have item 3 is a stub required to the west. We will provide that stub. We have no problem with that. And then there is item 2. The Cedar Ridge at Morgan Creek has some larger lots, and so we'll agree to 7,500 square foot on our east side, abutting them.
So you're in agreement with all the TEs?
Yes.
Okay. We have someone signed up. Do we have any questions of our applicant before we do? Brad Tipton?
Thank you. My name is Brad Tipton. I am located at 9537 Southwest 35th Terrace in Walden Estates Addition. I am the president of the HOA for both Walden Creek and Walden Estates. I really am not here to protest the development. However, just to the east there is Morgan Creek, Phase 3 that they put in, and I think they tried to sneak that in without their detention engineered structures and got caught by that 4-inch rain, 5-inch rain early August, and it filled. You can see there's 1, 2, 3 ponds. I'll say this, all the water, at least 80% of it, runs through and in between Walden Estates and Walden Creek. The gentleman up here a minute ago was talking about density. That whole section from Morgan to County Line Road, Southwest 29th to Southwest 44th, is going to be rooftops. That's a section of rooftops and a lot of water. You can see in the map now clearly the 1, 2, 3 ponds. We haven't even got this other side of Morgan Creek finished up yet. They're still trying to get streets in and fix their sedimentation and stormwater flow problems. And now we see this, but I don't know if they've been instructed to do any detention for stormwater and sedimentation. I don't see it on that map, but I can't attribute to whether they are. They are disturbing more than 10 acres there, because it's a 40-acre scenario, and I'm not going to quote Muni Code 16.9. Y'all could probably recite it to me just as easily. But we are getting to the point where we are getting contribution to stormwater runoff and sedimentation to existing downstream structures, which you see the 3 between our 2 additions. And so I guess I'm asking that if or what detention structures are going to be put in the engineer's plan, and also that this be done in a proactive manner before ground is road graded or turned, and not have this situation that we're currently in. Because right now we're talking with our legal advisor about this Phase 3 over there on Morgan Creek. And so we're just here to say, is it going to be a proactive deal, or are they going to go out there and start their development without any detention. The stormwater inspector came out, we flew a drone over that back part and knew what a mess we had, and he come over there shaking his head and saying, I could cite them right now if you want to. So,
Mr. Reed, would you like to come up and talk to us about drainage?
So this is not a detention required area. Per ODEQ, 10 acres to a place, wall construction is required to have temporary sediment basins. So we would be happy to do that. It's a construction issue more than a planning issue, but per DEQ, we would be required to do the temporary sedimentation basins to eliminate some of that.
So that would be in the proactive category?
Yes. And that is a DEQ requirement, so.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Like I say, if you knew the topography of that, all the water goes that way. So I'm kind of surprised that they're not having to put a pond in there to detain stormwater. But has that been looked at by an engineer to say, oh, that, they don't need that? Because like I say, you've got a section here, and that water all, eventually under rooftops, is all coming to that point right there. Then it goes under Morgan Road into a creek, back around and into the North Canadian River. So,
Item 2C from the staff report, detention is not required at this time. In the event of future flooding structures downstream, site detention will be required in ordinance of 16.9.
So if it becomes a problem, it will be required?
Yes.
It's not required at this time?
At this time. And we can, we'll deal with engineering staff on the requirements of this, but for the staff report that we have.
I will say, I don't know if this was, I can't recall if the development to the west there that abuts, and is adjacent to, parallel to Morgan Road, was a preliminary plat or a final plat, but I know the folks in the middle there to the east were also concerned about drainage and runoff in this area. As you guys will recall, there were some concerns there too, so seems like this area is having a lot of flooding problems with development. I don't know if that's an infrastructure issue from the city standpoint, or if that's just because of how much construction is going on at once. It's kind of a mess at the moment.
I think it's an issue we're going to continue to have over and over again, all across OKC. I think the city's aware of the issues that we're creating with the development pattern. In the end, until bigger, more structural issues are addressed citywide, this is the system we have, and I'm not sure. I'm not an engineer. We got to leave those decisions up to our engineering division. So I don't have any answers.
Well, sedimentation concerns me more than the stormwater right now, because we're starting to get deltas in those 3 ponds, and that's your stormwater control, and we're running them, plus the aesthetics of it. So I guess I call the stormwater inspector if and when that needs be. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any other comments, questions, concerns? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the application.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 12, C7019. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Item 13 is case C7026, the final plat of Mar-a-Lago, Section 2.
Good afternoon, Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates, here on behalf of the applicant. This is the second phase of Mar-a-Lago, just a continuation of the same type of development. We have 3 TEs. We agree with 1 and 2, and on item 2, we do agree, and we sent the staff an email, we do agree to provide an emergency access as the staff is required, and that's how it'll go. And we've sent this drawing and our comment to the staff, so I don't think we need a variance. We're in agreement to provide the secondary access.
So We're just going to, you're providing the emergency access, so we don't need the variance there, and we don't need the TE probably if the emergency access is being provided, would be my suggestion.
Well, the TE says that the
Yeah.
emergency drive is required, so we don't need to delete it necessarily, but they're going to comply, so.
Okay. Anybody got any questions or signed up?
Is there anyone present to be heard on this item? Commissioners?
I'll make a motion to approve item 13.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 13, C7026. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Item 14 was continued, item 15 was continued, and now we're on item 16 for PUD 1670. This is to rezone 721 Northeast 50th from R1 and AA to PUD 1670.
Is the applicant present? I guess we have a question of our continuance. Maybe we should deal with that.
You want to hear from me first, or gentleman standing behind me, looming large?
Well, it's my motion. We appreciate the commission.
Actually, it was Ms. Hewlett who raised...
I'm about to introduce her.
Okay.
Carrie? She goes first.
As I said before, my name is Carrie Hewlett. My address is 4670 North Willard Avenue.
Oh, my God.
I've been living in Thompson Woodland for about 29 years. My husband and I were looking for a larger home. He wanted to live in the country. I didn't want to commute. Thompson Woodlands was the perfect compromise, and it has been a great home. As I stated...
Would you pull your microphone down just a little bit?
Yes, thank you. As I stated before, I know you have the authority to hear this without a Ward 7 planning commissioner, but this is not a normal application. It's a very large project of 134 acres. It would change Ward 7 dramatically and it'd be a huge impact on the ward. It's very important that if this development goes through, that it be done in a as good as possible way. And so we want to take every step to make sure that happens. We feel it's important to have a commissioner from our ward who knows the area, knows the property, to make this decision. More importantly, this property is like none other in Oklahoma City. It was owned by a family for over 100 years, and so there is virgin forest. It's a part of the cross timbers. The staff recognizes that it's an environmentally sensitive area because of riparian forest, and admits that the aquifer is vulnerable. We just recently received some drainage and traffic studies that we have not been able to thoroughly evaluate. So although you have the authority to hear this, the neighbors of Thompson Woodlands, Burr Oaks, and surrounding neighbors are asking that you exercise your discretion and delay this hearing until we have a Ward 7 planning commissioner. And now Mr. Groves has some additional.
Thank you. Each of you has an exhibit book that we prepared just for you today.
Mr. Groves, before you go, this is, if you want to speak to the issue of us continuing this case, okay, do that, please.
I do.
And then what I would like to do is have some discussion of that particular question and a decision by the commission about whether they have a desire to have it heard today or to continue it, knowing that our applicant is not agreeing to a continuance. So.
Thank you. The reason I mentioned the exhibit book is that the argument I'm going to make to you is supported by some exhibits. And I want to point those out to you. The exhibits are number 8 and number 9 in your tabbed book. If you turn to number 8, you'll find a copy of the state statute that requires cities to have planning commissions. And if you look at the highlighted sentences, the statute says there shall be 9 members appointed by the mayor, and there shall be 1 member for each of the wards in the city. It's notable that this statute uses the word shall. Those of you who are lawyers on the commission know what shall means. It's mandatory. It is not a suggestion, it's a command. So this statute commands cities to have planning commissions with 9 members, the mayor to appoint 1 member for each ward. That's the law, state law. Now at the local level, what have we done? If you look at Exhibit 9, at the bottom of that first page, it says the Planning Commission will consist of 9 members, shall consist, reside in the city, and the mayor shall appoint. The next page, turn the page to the rest of that ordinance, and also it also deals with vacancies. Subsection F says, members may be appointed to fill the remainder of vacant terms by the mayor with the consent and approval of the city council. The state statute imposes a mandatory duty on the mayor. The ordinance imposes a mandatory duty on the mayor. The mayor has not fulfilled this duty. Now, we all know how the system works because you're all commissioners. It's just custom and usage, not law, but traditionally, the council member for a particular ward picks a planning commissioner, submits that name to the mayor. This is what happened with each of you. The mayor does some vetting of that person, and if the person is satisfactory, the mayor recommends it to the council. Council votes on it. In this instance, the Ward 7 council member is Dr. Lee Cooper, with whom you all know because he's been your colleague. Apparently, he does not intend to give a name to the mayor until after his successor is elected. It would be after November 6th. But this is before the commission now. So we need a commissioner now, not after November 6th. Now, quite aside from these statutory commands, there are constitutional implications to this. This may come as a surprise, but I think I'm right. The 14th Amendment to our United States Constitution, with its Oklahoma counterpart, guarantees equal protection of the law. And I think that means in this context that no one group of folks like Ward 7 residents can be singled out and not afforded the same protections given to the citizens of all the other wards. But if this goes forward and they're not represented when they're entitled to be by statute and ordinance, then I think they have been denied equal protection of the law. There's another factor, and I have to get out my little pocket copy of the Constitution. But the First Amendment to the Constitution, everybody knows that it deals with religious expression, freedom of speech, freedom of press. But sometimes people forget the last sentence. What this First Amendment to our United States Constitution says is that Congress shall make no law, and that applies to the state and local governments, that would abridge the right of the people to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, in the context of zoning, how is that carried out? We all know. The citizens of Ward 7 go to their planning commissioner and say, we oppose this project and we want you to support our opposition. If no commissioner exists, then their ability to exercise that right is abrogated. So, I think that if this goes forward without these folks being representative by the planning commissioner whose services they're entitled to, I think we breach state law, breach ordinances, breach the Constitution of the U.S. and of the state. Now, there's also, at the last tab in here, tab 10, is a lawsuit filed by Charles Watts, who, by the way, owns that little sliver of land off Lincoln Boulevard. He's in court challenging Cielo's right to be here and also challenging PUD. My clients have authorized me to intervene in that lawsuit and become a party to that lawsuit and assert whatever rights they have. If I have to do that, I think it's a sad commentary that I have to go into a court of law and ask that a planning commissioner be appointed when the law clearly requires it. I think the mayor needs to, if Dr. Cooper doesn't want to submit a name to the mayor, then I think the mayor needs to come up with his own name, have it approved by the council. And when we have a commissioner, we'll be prepared to go forward. Thanks very much for listening to this, and we'll, of course, have our opposition protest after David gets done, if you decide to go forward. And I hope you won't, because this is a serious matter. It's a serious matter. These folks are being treated like second-class citizens, that they don't get a planning commission. Everyone else has one. I know. Well, maybe the Ward 5 citizens are happy with that. Or not. Well,
so, sure, just briefly, obviously, no, we don't agree to a continuance. As you rightfully pointed out, Ward 5 is also vacant, and business still moves on. And so the Planning Commission still consists of 9 members. There just happens to be 2 vacant seats. In fact, there was another item on the docket today in Ward 7, I believe, on the consent docket. So what Eric is really asking for is a special favor on this piece of property, not equal protection among all of Ward 7, just special consideration on this piece of property because he represents clients who happen to live nearby. This is how business has always been conducted in front of this commission. It's no different than if there was a person that it was appointed in Ward 7 and they couldn't be here today. It wouldn't be an automatic stay of all business in Ward 7. So I don't believe that there is any statutory authority for his position that you can't move forward on this if there is a seat empty. The lawsuit is frankly just not ripe on the issue of the PUD. There's been no action by the city on the PUD, so I don't know how you can go to the courthouse and get a challenge on that. So we would ask that you hear it. He cited the First Amendment. I think that they have all the same rights to air their grievances, which I think he just stated he plans to do as soon as I'm done talking. So I know he has submitted a legal brief to everyone, so he is exercising that right that the First Amendment grants him through this process.
May I reply? I have not submitted a brief to you all. If I had, David, I'd have given you a copy of it. I submitted a book of exhibits. I haven't submitted a brief.
So I'm sorry, the June legal brief that Eric submitted that I believe is in your packet.
Okay, letter brief. The fact that a commissioner might be absent from a meeting, might be sick, whatever, is not an excuse not to obey the commands of the statute and the ordinance and the Constitution. All right.
This is something that I think we're going to have to decide. We've asked for a legal opinion. They've acknowledged that we're within our authority to act today. So the question really comes down to, it seems to me, whether there is some justifiable basis in this case, some reason that we would not act as we would, with any other case. The situation with respect to Commissioner Cooper having been elevated to the City Council in some ways maybe is irrelevant, but it is unique in the sense that he has been involved as a planning commissioner and then as a city council person, at every stage of the consideration of this application, and will continue to do so as it moves forward, if it moves forward. And has been able to contribute his views. May not be here to vote today, but he has been involved in that process. I'm a little bit personally concerned at the idea that because there is not a commissioner seated for a particular ward, that the residents of that ward have no representation. I've never viewed the Planning Commission and its processes in that way. I've attended some of these meetings, not nearly as many as Councilman Cooper has attended, but I don't think that I could agree that there is a lack of representation in this process. Me personally, as far as the residents of Ward 7 being singled out, I guess the flip side to that, on the one hand, I can understand that they feel that their position may not be as vociferously presented without a seated commissioner. On the other hand, if we were to say that there was no ability to move forward without a seated commissioner, then every case in every ward where there's not a seated commissioner would have to come to a halt. That is not sustainable in my view. So then you're left with the idea that this particular application is special somehow. And that, I think, is kind of dangerous ground, to say that we're going to hold this application up because there's not a seated commissioner, but we're going to take action on other cases in this ward and other wards without a seated commissioner is really problematic, I think, for a lot of different reasons. I think, for myself, what we can do is, our very best to defend the interests of the surrounding property owners as well as the city of Oklahoma City in giving our consideration to the application that's in front of us. But I do want to hear from the other commissioners on your views on this topic.
I think for me to assume that this planning commission, I'm going to back up, actually. We are here to protect the citizens and to serve them. That's why we're, ruling on these cases. But the citizens include not just the people in protest, but the applicants. And they have a right to be heard in turn when their application's ready. So I think we can't just consider the protestants here. I think it's the applicant's right as well, regardless of the status of the commissioner for that ward. I also think that everybody on this commission, regardless of the ward that they were appointed for, cares about the citizens in every other ward. And we all rule on each ward item. This isn't just the commissioner for that ward that has a vote. So I'm for hearing this item today. I think there's wisdom in the way that the city approaches these items otherwise, where we have heard items. I've been out. I've only missed one meeting, but there were Ward 6 items on that, and they were heard, and I think it was the right thing to do when I missed that meeting, because I trust my fellow commissioners. And that's my position.
So I agree with a lot of what Ace was saying, that we do represent the behalf of all the citizens. It's not just our ward. I'm, in fact, the at-large member, so I'm not here on behalf of any particular ward. So I don't think the protestants are not asking every application in the ward to be continued. They're headed that way a little bit with your argument, Mr. Groves, is that would be the case. But to the extent you give particular reasons why this application should be continued, Ms. Hewlett, I think, did give some. She gave some history of the land, the nature. The question is whether, the size of it. Is this particular piece so important that they would rather there be the commissioner from the ward? There's that argument. All I would like to hear is there a reason not to continue it. All I've heard is business must go on. So If the applicant could at least say there's some reason why it's important to move on. I haven't heard any reason not to continue it.
Sure. So fair question. I'd start with when we filed this application. We filed this application November 17th. So we are 10 months down the line. And in that interim period, we have met and met and met. When we first filed this, we intentionally set it off at a distance that we believe far enough away, rather than the normal Planning Commission hearing date. This should have come on for your consideration in January. Based upon when we filed it, it should have gone January 11th. But knowing that this was going to require some meetings, we intentionally set it out to February. We showed up at a meeting with the then councilman, and his first request to us after the meeting was commit to a 6-month continuance today to go meet with the neighbors and continue the dialogue. My client, without hesitation, agreed to the 6-month deferral. If you look at the first page of your staff report, you will see that the application was continued from February 8th, March 22nd, August 23rd, June 14th, and then again an additional continuance to today's hearing. So what I would tell you is, for those of us who have been in all of the meetings, or most of them, as Ms. Powers has been, we have found ourselves in a position where we are spending an hour to 2 hours in the evenings talking about a single issue. We have modified this case. We have amended use units. We've amended densities. We've moved things around. We've tweaked and tweaked and tweaked. And now, at least what these meetings have revealed, is we're talking about drainage. And so it's not we must move on, we got to hurry. It's the case is ready to be heard. There are no other issues lingering that additional meetings or additional time, which I think is what your question really is, why not continue it if there's a chance to resolve it? I don't think that's the case. And so it is ready to be heard by the commission, and a 10-month gap is the longest gap that I am aware of on any PUD, and it's all been by agreement with both my client and the neighbors who are protesting. So that is why I believe the application is ready to be heard.
I received 2 calls this week on cases that were supposed to come, on a case that was supposed to come before us today, and it was continued. It was a Ward 7 case, and I presume I was called because there wasn't a Ward 7 planning commissioner. I returned those calls the same way I would have returned a call that came in on my ward. I didn't receive calls here. I wasn't asked to engage or attend a specific meeting, or I would have done so. I don't view my seat as a Ward 8 Planning Commission member as just being for the Ward 8 Planning Commission cases. I view it as being here to be one of 9 people who are asked to make a majority recommendation through quorum and public hearing process to City Council. And so ultimately, we're here to make a recommendation. That's what we're here to do. We're not ruling on the case. This isn't where it ends. Our job, again, I'm speaking for myself, okay, not the commission. You have to decide what your role is here. I believe that my role is to be one of 9 people who listens to the merits of a case, looks at the comprehensive plan, looks at the use of the property, the density of that property, the problems it will create on infrastructure. I cast a vote. If 5 people agree, it goes to City Council, and the recommendation from us is approval. If we voted against it, it would go with a recommendation of denial from us. The City Council ultimately can overrule our recommendation, because it's just that, it's a recommendation. But I do agree that we have an obligation too, regardless of how you might feel about the case, if an applicant comes forward, if you try to put yourself on the other side of that, is to make sure that the business of the city is conducted as quickly as possible. On average, rezoning applications, if they run smoothly through a process, take 100 days. 100 days of discourse, opportunity to meet. I think you've heard our chairperson today a couple of times stress the importance of making sure that you've met with the neighbors before you come in here. That's something that we're very cognizant of, and we do, if those cases have not had adequate time for hearing and public discussion, force applicants to continue it because that's appropriate. I don't hear that here. So I hope that if you're here and you live in Ward 7, you would feel that even if that case, if I lived in that ward, I'd look at it the same way as a case that's going to be in Ward 8. Because I don't look at those cases any differently. I try to just be one of 9 voices. And all we need are 5 voices. And so we have 5 voices today. I just ask for your confidence that we'll hear it responsibly, and I think we should hear it today.
I have nothing that hasn't already been said. I mean, I think we're ready.
So we're in unanimous agreement that we're going to move forward with this case today? That's what I'm hearing? Yes? Yes?
Speaking only for myself, yes.
Okay. Then let's do that.
Okay, so for purpose of the record, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. I'm here today on behalf of the applicant, who is the CLO, Commissioner of the Land Office. Also with me are several members or several staff people from the CLO, as well as Tim Johnson, who is the civil engineer for this case, and Mark Zitzow, who is a planner in his office. So,
David, just a second. Do we need to have a vote on whether we're going to hear it? We had a request for a continuance that we don't need to. Okay. Procedurally, okay, that's fine. Thanks.
Since you went back, when you were saying, was it unanimous or whatever, I think you did not have a motion for continuance, I think is all we had there, right? We didn't have a unanimous anything. We had no motion for continuance.
That's my understanding.
Perfect.
I mean, if it would make people feel better, we can vote, but I don't see the need for it. Okay.
okay. So, I referenced earlier that we filed this November 17th of 2017. So, that was not the inception of this. When the CLO set out to look at this piece of property, they hired a consulting firm to come up with a master development plan. That's what you see here. That process started years ago. The community engagement started years ago. So this idea and this concept on this particular piece of property is one that has been evolving and thought through and discussed for several years. So this was the the initial design of what would happen here. And it's going to look very different than what I'm going to show you, but I thought for the purposes of where we have been and where we are now, it makes some sense. So if you look at it, all you're going to see that looks familiar in the after is this one town center. What they had designed was a lot of high intensity and density close to this single-family neighborhood that exists to our south and to our east. It became clear very quickly that this was not a scenario that would work for the neighbors, in large part to the differences in the use, but also a tributary to the Deep Fork Creek that runs through here and concerns with drainage. So what happened once Johnson Associates was hired...
Mr. Box, real quick, would you put that one back up just for a second? So I didn't, in the town center, save that one, and the corner of what would be 50th and Lincoln, leave that one alone. What was originally contemplated there in that, was that multifamily? Is that what that was?
So a combination of multifamily, corporate office, just a mix of uses.
But that specifically would, I mean, at the end of the day, these are pretty pictures, but what was originally contemplated was right there. Is that supposed to be office, or is that supposed to be apartments there?
This?
Yes.
I believe this was an office complex. This was the multifamily. But then the concept plan didn't differentiate where certain uses could or could not go.
Oh, so the PUD was all-encompassing. There were not separated tracks.
So there wasn't a PUD. At the stage that we got involved, we being myself and Mr. Johnson's office, there was a 3-inch thick development guideline document and this pretty picture. And so it was our task to come up with a PUD that, one, we thought was something we could actually take through the process and look like what the city requires, and two, one that we believed we could get the neighbors on board with. And so we essentially scrapped everything you see here, save for the town center concept.
Okay, and that was due to the feedback you're getting?
That's right.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understood where we started, so, okay.
Sure. So where we've gone to now is through a host of different modifications is what you see here. And so again, you will see, tract A, you will see what looks like the similar town center concept, except we've shrunk it down. We decided early on that we really need to break this thing into tracts. We need to make sure we have specific regulations as it relates to the land that abuts the neighborhood to the south and the east, that being the Burr Oaks neighborhood. And we need to come up with enough provisions in here that hopefully the neighbors could get comfortable and through limiting use units, limiting heights, limiting densities. One of the challenges I think that we believe we had is if you look at where we're located, see if I can get this to work. Cindy, could you go to the next slide? And one more. So if you look at where we're located, we are north of 50th on the east side of Lincoln, between Lincoln and Kelly, and our northern boundary is the Deep Fork Creek and I-44. So we are at the intersection of a major interstate highway and Lincoln Boulevard that was or maybe still is a state highway, but either way, it's 3 lanes in both directions and is a major traffic carrier. Because of that, this is an urban medium designation through the comp plan. And so I think it's important that we look at what urban medium means. And what it says in the definition section in the plan is that UM applies to fully urbanized areas of the city, most of which were built prior to the 1960s. Importantly, developments are expected to be larger in scale and have greater intensity and a mixture of uses than developments found in UL. Developments within UM areas should support efficient transit usage and provide pedestrian and bicycle access to retail, services, parks, and other destinations. So we tried to meet all these goals. Again, urban medium has a much higher density range than what the existing neighborhoods around us have. If you look there, you see that the gross density range for urban medium is between 10 and 40 dwelling units an acre. So we have 134 acres here, and so our job, as we felt, was to find a happy middle ground, that being a development that was fit within the comprehensive plan, but also appreciated and recognized the existing land use pattern to our south and to our east that is not in conformance with what we now would have as urban medium. So that's how we arrived on this pretty picture, as Mr. Craven said. But instead of it just having a pretty picture, we wanted to find a way through our PUD to put teeth in it so that we can give some level of certainty to the neighbors as to what would be built immediately adjacent to their neighborhood. So that being immediately adjacent to the Burr Oaks neighborhood and then immediately adjacent to Kelly. Cindy, if you go one more. Okay. So what we did was we took a look at what kind of lot sizes the Burr Oaks neighborhood has. And what we found was the lots on paper are large. But part of the reason that they're large is the lots themselves, the people that live in Burr Oaks, if they own a lot on the creek, their actual lot is to the center line of this tributary, which causes a problem. That becomes problematic for the city to regulate drainage because the city doesn't own it, they don't have an easement. The individual landowners become responsible for the maintenance of that creek bank. So this site is zoned R1 and AA now, but specifically here it's zoned R1. So the minimum lot size in R1 is 6,000 square feet. So what we did was we made all lots immediately adjacent to the creek, that being this first row right here, the minimum lot size is 7,500 square feet. The purpose of this exhibit, and what we heard was that those are incompatible with the lots that they have because their lots are much larger. So what we have done is provided I believe a 200-foot setback from the center line of the creek to our lots. Okay? And so what I had Mr. Johnson do to see if we were comparable in terms of lot size was mimic the condition south of the creek, north of the creek. In other words, if our lots, rather than being pulled back 200 feet, went to the center line of the creek like the Burr Oaks neighbors did, what is our lot size? And what we found is it's almost identical. We range from 15,000 square feet up to 23,820 square feet. So the conditions are almost identical, except that we've pulled it off and we have allowed for the opportunity to have green space and the opportunity to potentially have detention or some drainage solutions in that area. One of the other things that became real clear was
So, just to be clear about that, so by putting that additional area into common area, what you're doing is actually preventing an individual property owner from removing the trees, or it'll be cared for by the homeowners association, it'll be maintained, it'll be...
Right.
Whereas on the south side, with respect to the individual property owners, there's not that same protection. They could go in and take all their trees down. I don't know why anybody would want to do that, but it's possible.
Or conversely, if there was a problem, it would be up to that one single individual property owner to go pay to fix the problem. Whereas if you plat it in common area and an HOA is required, there will at least be some pool of funds in which to go put money towards a potential problem instead of it weighing on a single property owner. And I believe that Public Works would say this would be the preferred way. I don't think the city likes this scenario anymore because you are forcing individual property owners to take on an enormous task of maintaining a bank of a major tributary to the Deep Fork. And so because we pulled it off such a significant amount, we've done two things. We provided that mechanism to hopefully fix or cure any drainage problems, but we've also provided a significant buffer in terms of our development and theirs. So we are through trees, through the creek. Our development sits an enormous distance away from these neighbors. So we believe we've achieved the compatibility that I think the neighbors wanted as it relates to what they're going to see or what will be immediately on the other side of the creek. So next, we did have element of multifamily. So in the PUD, you'll see that the multifamily use unit is there. It became clear that the ability to have traditional apartments was a problem and something that they weren't real excited about. But I don't know that the density was something they had a big problem with. And so what we have done is we have eliminated the ability to have a traditional garden-style apartment. Cindy, if you go back to the page 2, the first page after the, right, yeah, right there. So when I say traditional garden style, let's see if I can get this to work. So right here on the west side, I don't know if you can see on your screen where I'm pointing, but on the big screen I'm pointing. Right here across from our site, west of Lincoln, is a large apartment complex, and that is the traditional garden-style apartment. That being you have a big building with unit over unit, large expanses of parking, kind of open breezeway concepts, and we have eliminated those. We've prohibited them in there, and instead what we have required is what you will see, at least in Tract B, is something similar to a big house concept. Those of you who are on the commission who have been here a little while, and perhaps it's only Ms. Powers and Mr. Hensley, but the old John Marshall High School, when my client bought that was demolished, and his concept was the big house concept. It was approved and it's now built. When you look at a big house concept development, it is intended to look like a large estate-type home that you would perhaps not even know that it was an apartment building. But you have multiple units within it. Almost all of them have garages. And so you are reducing the amount of parking that you have in a traditional garden style and creating more of a stately estate-type home with covered parking that looks more in keeping with traditional neighborhoods. So that's what we require in this Tract B. In addition, what we show on this plan is some form of attached single family. Mr. Zitzow will kind of walk through some of the housing types that we propose within this momentarily. But think of the Hill, think of Bricktown, downtown type of developments where it's single family but attached, townhome type development. What we show here are single family detached but on smaller lots with rear alley access. And then we have a cottage element down here on 50th Street. Then moving to Tract A, it was still the desire that there would be no garden style, and so throughout the entirety of the PUD we have prohibited that from being developed. What we anticipate in Tract A and what we have within the PUD is a wrap type project, what you see downtown, where you have the parking garage in the center of the development, and it's an urban style development. Think the edge or think the level to where you can't see the parking structure. It's self-contained within the middle of the development. So we believe that was in keeping with the urban medium. It's in keeping with recent development trends. And finally, what you see here is this corporate office development. Again, that was further south. It's potentially much taller buildings than perhaps be compatible along the creek. And so we have pushed the corporate office element up into Tract A. Finally, this Tract C, there was some early discussions in our meetings with neighbors about Tract C. If you can't see it, down here right at the corner of 50th and Lincoln. And what that would be, another change we've had is this building was actually pushed further east, and there was parking in front. In discussions with staff, they believe that the Lincoln overlay that is either done or working its way through the process would force us or require us to have the buildings fronting on Lincoln. So we've modified that and required that, which I believe is now in conformance with the Lincoln overlay goals. So you may remember some of the discussion during that process. So we've met that desire in Tract C. Additionally, in Tract C, early on, there was a request that this not allow a full-size grocery store. That request has since been removed. It's our belief through discussions with the neighbors that they would like the ability to have a full-size grocery store here. And so that is now a use that would be permitted within this tract at 50th and Lincoln. So with that, again, when we set out and continued to have these meetings, we were able to start drilling down into some of the finer points. And so we started talking about uses. Some of the uses that gave some concern were, the alcoholic beverage retail sales. My client removed it. The fast food, which is always a use that people are concerned about, so we removed the drive-in fast food. The fast food with a drive-through window was kept, but limited to a deli or coffee shop. One of the problems that we have with the current rendition of our code is there's no distinction between a McDonald's or a Panera. I think most neighborhoods would be thrilled or perhaps happy to have a Panera, but a McDonald's or that type is not something they'd be satisfied with. So we've put provisions in the PUD to limit any drive-through to a deli or a coffee shop. You certainly can't use end users, but I think the city, in the multiple cases that I've been involved in, has deemed that enough to limit it to the type of uses that neighbors, I think, are okay with restricting the ones that they're not. We added some additional setback along Kelly. We now require a 100-foot setback from the center line of Kelly to our development. It's heavily treed if you've driven Kelly through there, and so what we require here, in addition to the 100-foot setback, is also that the fence be on the west side of the trees. So and rather than ripping trees out to build a wall or a fence on Kelly, we're going to keep that natural buffer, put the fence on the other side of that buffer so that you'll see trees, and then if there is a fence, it'll be on our side to leave that natural state for the neighbors to the east and the traveling public. So the other thing we set out to do was to talk about drainage and traffic. One of the big, I think, hurdles that we've had and that you as a commission always have, and you've heard it here today, is drainage. One of the problems you have is, unless there's a plat before you or a specific plan in which they have construction-ready drawings, it's almost impossible to predict where each and every structure and each and every drive lane and each and every paved surface are going to go. So it's almost impossible at a zoning phase to come up with the exact impact that the development will have to the drainage pattern. With that said, we set about trying to accomplish the task of finding out what the impact was. I'm going to let Mr. Johnson speak to that momentarily. But what we have in our PUD, because of the significant amount of trees that exist here, is a lot of terrain. A lot of terrain that causes problems for the development, but a lot of terrain that causes some possibilities and some enhancements to perhaps the neighbors. So of the 134 acres, over 57 acres of that will remain open space. And we have actually required in the PUD that 40% of the total PUD be open space. So you're going to see a significant amount of open space retained, much of the trees retained. So only 60% of the entire 134 acres could be developed. With that in mind, Mr. Johnson went about studying the impact of this development based on a calculation of 85% developed area. So again, a condition greater than we could achieve through the regulations that we've placed on here. And he had some findings that I'll let him share in a moment. And then traffic. Traffic was the other big issue. As you're aware, traffic studies are no longer required on behalf of applicants. That's why developers pay impact fees. But we went ahead and did a traffic study. So we've now done 2 very expensive studies that aren't required, but in an effort to try to solve any problems that might be out there, have done it. The traffic study has some recommendations that Tim will tell you about that we agree to do and agree to put in, and I think staff is supportive of those. So with that, I'm going to turn it over momentarily to Tim, let him talk about the drainage and traffic. Actually, first I'm going to have Mark come in and talk about the housing types, and then after Mark and Tim, I'll get back up and share a few other thoughts, unless there's any questions of me at this moment.
I do have one, if that's okay.
Sure.
So you talked about the garden-style apartment. Let's make that a term of art for a second. I understand what we're trying to limit, but what about the specific PUD language, the master design statement language, would limit the type of development that you referred to across Lincoln?
Sure. So if you look at the PUD, you will see in Track B, and so this would be on page 7, under residential uses, multiple family residential, and then limited to attached, detached townhomes and large home concept apartments, further restricted to prohibit garden-style apartments.
Are you reading from page 7 of the MDS or page 7 of the staff report?
Of the master design statement.
Okay, 1 second. All right, go ahead.
So on page 7, under residential uses, 8200.12 is where you'll see we limit it to attached/detached townhomes and large home concept.
Right, but there's also multifamily contemplated in Tract A, right?
Yep.
And so...
And the same restrictions applies in terms of no garden style.
It's just that you're not contemplating townhome there. It's the parking in the center.
Sure. Okay. But again, you'll find the same restriction. So on page 6, under 8200.12, multiple family residential, restricted to prohibit traditional garden-style apartments.
Okay. And the restriction on these things, is this feedback from the staff, or is this feedback from the neighbors? Where did the desire to restrict this type of multifamily come from?
Neighbors.
Okay. So I guess having not seen enough of these where we're trying to restrict different types of multifamily development, I mean, candidly, just the ignorance here, I'm curious if the staff is comfortable that the language that's included in this master design statement is an effective prohibition on that type of development.
I think we're comfortable enough that we know what those types of apartments are, and again, you'll get to see all these again through a specific plan.
So if they, so at that phase, they'd have to come forward, and if they're bringing that, then it's another discussion.
You'll get to see their product at that
and
time.
for the folks here from Ward 7 benefit, at that point, they have the opportunity to see that again and be heard again, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure everybody knew that. Okay.
Okay. And I'll turn over to Mr. Zitzow at this point.
Good afternoon, Mark Zitzow, 1 East Sheridan Avenue with Johnson & Associates. Is this working? Yeah. So first I just want to touch on a planning concept that comes from out west called the missing middle. What this addresses is over the past 60-plus years, our communities and greater our country has not been great at building this particular type of housing, which ranges from duplex to live-work units. We've done a great job at building single-family detached homes and garden-style and mid-rise apartments. So the pieces in here, there was a lot of questions during our neighborhood meetings about what duplexes look like, what fourplexes look like. This PUD envisions a different type of duplex than what would traditionally be seen around the Oklahoma City area. So I'm just going to go through the different housing types that we allow and the different tracks. So tract A is the town center concept. And so the town center concept is a miniature, dense, walkable downtown. Some pictures up here come from Texas and Arkansas. The one on the bottom left is Conway. And it's typical retailers you'd see in a mall, but in a more walkable format, typically served through parking garages. So the tract A housing, back to the apartments, these are all projects from around Oklahoma City, the Edge and Level urban apartments. This is a wrap project, also known as a Texas Donut. It's a parking garage in the middle with apartments surrounding it. And this is what would be in place of the traditional garden-style apartments, which is a sprawled-out, not very dense, parking-heavy development. So Tract B, I think we spent most time talking about in the community meetings. Our lot sizes along the creek are 7,500 square feet, and I think about 65 feet wide. And these are housing types that you would see on a lot like that. The garage being pushed back in the rear of the lot, similar to a Heritage Hills or Crown Heights style. Next, there's a lot of questions about our single-family, detached, smaller lots. So those are homes that are on anywhere from a 25-foot wide lot up to a 40-foot wide lot. They're served off an alley in the back, which helps achieve the narrower lot. You don't need a drive aisle. And with these are very popular in these types of concepts throughout the country. You have a side yard rather than a backyard, and your community space throughout the development acts as the backyard for the entire community rather than having such large backyards for individual homeowners. So Tract B housing, again, restricts this type of multifamily. This is not what is desired or achieved in Tract B. So some of the other housing types were cottage-style development, which is on off of 50th, Northeast 50th. These units would all face inward. They're typically geared toward empty nesters or people in retirement who no longer want to maintain a yard and want to live in an active, walkable neighborhood. And then we had a lot of questions about what duplexes and fourplexes and triplexes would look like, and these are various examples of how you can stack those. Units like this are extremely common throughout Heritage Hills and Mesa Park. The concept of missing middle is how do you achieve density in single-family areas but make it compatible with the single-family homes. And we contend, and many others throughout the country, believe that this type of development fits in nicely with single-family homes, which has proven successful in Oklahoma City already in Heritage Hills. Granted, that development is in excess of 100 years. Then there's a single-family attached. These are typically platted townhomes. The hill is the bottom right image. They're anywhere from 1,800 to 3,500 square feet, depending on the number of stories. They're all rear-loaded, so the garages are in the back. And architecturally, the style may change, but our PUD requires a 70% masonry to be built to. David touched on the big house concept. There are various ways to do this. Again, we envision it to be rear-loaded. These concepts can range anywhere from 4 units all the way up to 10. The parking is generally in the back and is located within the same building. So many times the upstairs unit would have direct access to a private garage below. And then Tract C, I'll quickly touch on what's envisioned there. To the top right image is the grocery store up on May Avenue, Uptown Grocer. On the bottom left is a Trader Joe's at Nichols Hills. In complying with the TE and the staff report and the Lincoln overlay, any building, any retail building will be pulled toward the street with a facade similar to the entrance. And so quickly, just an overall project summary. Our site plan shows 838 units on 134 acres with 57 acres of common area. That gives us a gross density of 6.25 units per acre. And if you recall, the comp plan suggests 10 to 40 units per acre. So we're below what the comp plan is stating on the drawing provided, and the PUD allows a range that is below and slightly within what the comp plan calls for. And I will turn it over to Tim to talk about the drainage and traffic studies.
Maybe not surprisingly, I have one question. So these are really great-looking pictures. And we know already that any of these things that are going to be built are going to have to come back for a specific plan in accordance with the master design statement. But again, are all the images that you've shown here, do they fit with the master design statement's requirement for things like 75% masonry material? And I mean, are these images really fitting of what ultimately could be built here under the master design statement, or are these pretty pictures?
So a majority of them fit within the architectural regulations. There are a few that might have more architectural detailing of wood and metal panels. But the pictures are more to show how you can achieve density in a complementary way to single-family neighborhoods, not necessarily any particular architectural style that will be built.
To answer your question, our master design statement has regulations higher than some of these could be built under. In other words, some of these that you see wouldn't meet what we require. So we have the 75% masonry product or masonry requirements. Some of these may not even have the 75% masonry.
And I didn't get a chance to compare the exact way this language reads, but typically what we see is 70%, and we see some people in that are building sort of, I hate to use the word lower quality, but less expensive developments that are 60% or 50%. So you're proposing that building facade means our exterior building envelope, all four sides, is requiring 75% masonry material?
Yes.
Okay.
All elevations, 75%.
So specific plans come in here, they got to have that?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I want to make sure of. Okay.
Or staff would recommend denial, because it wouldn't be in conformance with the PUD.
I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say there's no or. Don't meet the requirement.
Good afternoon, Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates. I'm just going to go real quickly, talk about drainage, and a little bit about traffic. I'll go traffic first. So as David mentioned, we did do a traffic study. When we met with the neighbors after we did the first traffic study, there was concerns about some of our counts, so we went back out and recounted 50th Street and Kelly and redid that. And the recommendations that we have made for our full developed build-out is to make improvements at 50th Street, westbound and northbound, protected right turn. And we met with ODOT, and they have tentatively approved location of a signal on Lincoln. That'll be our main entrance, and which will provide a B and C level there. And then we tested Kelly and 50th Street, and it operated at a level service A, both now and fully developed. So those items will be recommended to be installed with the development.
Your traffic signal, the staff report reflects this language. It says, these improvements shall not be required until such a point that the improvements are warranted. Who is the decider on when that is warranted?
The Development Center staff has asked us to modify that language, which we've agreed to at the time of the commercial building permit.
So at the time that a commercial building permit is pulled, that signalized intersection's got to go in?
Yes.
Okay. That makes me feel better.
I'm going to touch on drainage. So this is the firm panel for FEMA. You guys probably have seen these. The little gray areas are the 100-year floodplain. The hatched areas within the gray areas are the floodway, and our side is highlighted in yellow. So on our north side, we've got Deep Fork Creek. On our south side, we have tributary 16 to Deep Fork, and they converge off of our side about a half a mile right before you get to Grand. So our study that we did, which again, we felt like it was premature because we don't know exactly what's going in there, but to be conservative, as David mentioned, I used an 85% runoff coefficient to determine what the impact of our increased runoff would be at that point of confluence. This is not in a basin that would require detention because there's not structure flooding downstream. But we have put language in the PUD that allows for detention to be built. We have further defined that language to require the detention to be put in the sub-basins of the development. And what that means is we wouldn't have one big regional pond. We would have ponds that would be in the sub-basins so they could be a better treatment to the water discharging into the main creek. And we think that that's belts and suspenders with regard to detention. The caveat we put in there is that the city engineer's office or public works director would have to review and approve that, which I've confirmed with him that they would in fact do. The impact of the runoff at the confluence of those two tributaries that I mentioned does not show that we would have any backwater impact to the north-south stream or tributary 16. However, the city engineer's office is more than likely going to say, we don't want you to increase it 1 iota downstream, and therefore the detention will be required. So the PUD allows for that. It's got provisions in there to enhance that, and we feel comfortable with that will provide protection downstream with regard to historic runoff. Both tributaries, as David mentioned a little bit on the neighborhood to the south, that lies in a individual lot owners. The Deep Fork Creek lies partially on ODOT right-of-way and partially on the CLO property. So as the developer, whoever the developer is at the time, develops adjacent to that area, they will have to take whatever necessary steps to improve, repair, armor that channel to keep it from eroding backwards into any improvements that are made. The north piece is important because we agree in the PUD that we're going to work with the Oklahoma City Parks Department on a bond issue project to put in trails, of which we will clarify in the PUD that the easements will be donated at the time that the Parks Department has their plan completed. And to achieve that, they're going to be down in that floodplain as all the trails, or a lot of the trails are. So we'll be working with them to make sure that that trail's protected from now on. I think I touched on all the drainage stuff. Any questions?
Yeah, sorry. The trail construction requirement, that's in 9.7 of our staff report in your master design statement. So that language is going to be cleaned up to specify that those easements are going to be provided free of charge to the city.
Yes.
Do I understand that correctly? And
That's
then it will be the city's obligation to maintain those at that point? Okay. And then on the north side of the commercial tract on Deep Fork that you discussed, whereas Mr. Box told us that the HOA will be maintaining the tributary there on the south side, you're saying that it would be the individual developer's responsibility on the north side and not the HOA? And why is there a discrepancy there?
The difference you'll find in a mixed-use development is anything that's commercial or office is usually put into what's called a property owners association, as opposed to the HOA being a homeowners association. And because there's more improvements and more maintenance typically in the office commercial development, they let that CAM be part of their rent or ownership costs, whereas the homeowners, to keep their dues at a reasonable amount, will be maintaining open space and common areas and that one trib to the south.
Commissioner Highsmith and I met with you to talk about drainage, just so everybody knows. And in that conversation, you made this point. I just want to make it clear, and I want to make sure that I have it clearly. So the idea behind letting the Public Works Director have input after the fact in this situation is because while we're looking at how this development could develop within the master design statement, this isn't necessarily how it will develop. And so we don't know whether or not at this juncture it would make more sense to require detention or to allow it to flow through to prevent it from backing up. And so the idea is to leave that flexibility as it develops to make those calls. And how often would the city be reviewing those drainage plans as it develops out to address things like drainage concerns in the area?
Good question. Thank you for bringing that up. So,
before you do that, I'm not sure I agree with quite the way you phrased that. We're not allowing the development or the Public Works Director to have different or more input here than he would have. And this is just how that works.
Well, this has started appearing a couple times in these, in our staff reports. And again, I never got an answer from it. I should have asked staff after the last meeting before this one. But I had never noticed these review and approval processes built into these agreements. I mean, I understand that's how it works at the permit phase. When a building permit is pulled, it goes through that process. I understand that. but I hadn't seen it in here before a couple meetings ago. And maybe I
think we're articulating it here just so that it's clear, but
Okay.
it's not something different.
Okay.
Yes, and the point that would come about is anytime a plat's filed, all the engineering documents would be submitted at that time, neighbors would be put on notice. Anytime a permit is filed and/or a submittal for a site approval is filed, then the PUD requires that the neighbors be put on notice for that as well. And that's when the documents go in.
Staff says they're comfortable with, with this as proposed based on their recommendation. I'm assuming staff is comfortable that that drainage plan and the way to address that is the way they'd like to see it.
Okay, we'll let Jared speak to that.
Hi. Jared Norris, Oklahoma City Public Works Technical Division. I just wanted to point out that the staff report does in fact say that detention will be required. And, I also want to point out that 16.9 of our ordinance, detention ordinance, C says that detention storage will be required for increased runoff resulting from development having impervious in excess of 70% for all developments on parcels greater than 2 acres. So I believe that this would fall under that statement in our in our Chapter 16, Section 9 of our ordinance. So I just want to point that out. I know that there has been some conversations, and what I have received is that detention will be required for this development. So I just want to point that out to everyone before clarify.
And from our standpoint, as it is in every case, if it's what's required, then that's what will be done. So I think, one of the things that has been just a constant point of concern that has been expressed by the folks that I've met with who live in the area in particular is the issue of drainage in sort of more detail than is really possible at this stage. When you're zoning something, you're absolutely right. What we're looking at here is a ceiling, right? What we're approving is sort of the maximum of what can be done. But how it will actually develop is what will control the requirements for drainage and traffic. And so a lot of the more specific, precise, and detailed questions about drainage and traffic, questions that these folks have and are entirely understandable, are just not, ripe for determination at this point. So one of the things that I have wanted and I think we have achieved with respect to the proposal that's in front of us now is a process and a mechanism by which those people will have the input and the information exchange that they're seeking at the point, if we're telling them we can't decide that now, that they'll have that opportunity at the point that those decisions are being made. And through a platting process on the residential property and a specific plan process on the commercial and mixed-use development portion of the property, they will have that opportunity for notice, for input, for information exchange. And so they can continue to participate in the process in a way that's meaningful. We can't decide here today, where every detention pond will go, how deep it'll be, how big it'll be. It's just, you don't know those things until you know what's actually going to get built on the property. So I I think we have provided for a process by which they can get their answers and their questions and their concerns heard and addressed. And we'll come back to that later when we talk about TEs.
Yes, so to that end, and I'll be brief, so TE, there are 4 TEs. We agree with TE 1, 3, and 4. We don't agree with TE 2 because of what Ms. Powers was just talking about. One of the big questions that we have been asked is how are the neighbors, how's the community going to be able to stay engaged in the conversation if this gets approved? Certainly, all the single-family residential will have to be platted. So when you go and plat, notice gets sent, so they will have an opportunity to know that a plat is coming, an opportunity to know when the hearing is in front of the Planning Commission and come and voice any concerns or come and hear how the drainage solution will be achieved. We require a specific plan for development in this PUD. One of the problems with the way that we currently have the specific plan process in Oklahoma City is notice is not required. So we have put into the PUD that notice will be required so that we can continue the dialogue, so that the neighbors will know no matter where a shovel of dirt gets turned on here, they're going to know before it happens, and they're going to know that there's a hearing that has to happen before it happens. So we have asked that notice be sent on the specific plan. The TE asked us to remove that provision, so we would ask that you delete TE number 2 to keep in the provision to allow the community to receive notice of the specific plan. Staff has some concern of that. We're happy to work with staff to add whatever language they believe necessary to give them what they need, but we agree with 1, 3, and 4. We'd ask to delete TE 2. One of the problems with platting...
Can I just say, and I have talked to staff about that. I've talked to planning staff. I've talked to Public Works. I've talked to Councilman Cooper. And, I think we're okay with that approach at this point.
So one of the requests in Mr. Grove's letter brief, I think from back in June, is that at the same time as we zone this, we also provide a plat. It is not something we can do for much of the reasons we've discussed. We don't know exactly what building is going to go where these property lines are going to be split. But we absolutely require platting throughout the single family. Platting is not required for the commercial. It's often that commercially developed property is not platted. In fact, you saw one, your first item today that wasn't on the consent docket was a lot split in a commercialized area because it's not platted. You don't always know how buildings are going to lay out in commercial centers, especially when you have a town center concept like this. To plat it now would just be impossible. But because we require the specific plan, there is going to be additional checks, additional steps that a developer is going to have to go through, that the neighbors are going to be able to be involved in to make sure that all of the pretty pictures, all of the promises made in the PUD are in fact going to be adhered to. So with that, we'd ask for your approval. Be happy to answer any additional questions you might have.
Commissioners, do we have any additional questions of the applicant at this point, or shall we hear from our protestants? Let's do that. I have several people who are signed up. Mr. Groves, did you want to lead off? Or do you want to let your...
Thank you. Yes.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in just real quick. Could we just remind that we keep the comments, if you've got a comment that is the same as someone who's previously gotten up to protest, it's okay to come up and say that you agree with what has already been said. Let's try not to repeat issues, just to respect everyone's time here today.
Yes, and I have cautioned the various speakers to do what you're suggesting. I've asked them not to be cumulative or repetitive. I want to begin by introducing Sharon Strickland, and we're going to give you a little information about, can we have some of those boards up, Shannon? We want to give you a little picture of the neighborhood that I represent and the other neighborhoods. We have a little video for you as background for who these folks are. Hope you can all see this. Just so you'll know, this of course is the subject site. The Neighborhood Association, Thompson, Woodland, Burr Oaks, Lowell Neighborhood Association, that's my client. So I represent that area. But we are allied with other neighborhoods who have concerns, such as Catherine's Wildwood and all the other areas. So we're going to tell Also going to tell you a little bit about the history of this area, which is relevant to this development.
I'm Sharon Strickland, and I live at 4704 Willard Avenue in Thompson's Woodland. So we want to invite you into our neighborhood, so please watch the video. None of you live in Ward 7 or in Thompson's Woodland, so this is what we have. We have 1/2 acres up to more than 5 acres for each home, and it is in the cross timber. Please watch the pictures. They're up on the screen. These are photos of homes from Burr Oaks and Thompson Woodlands and Passions Well. And these are our neighbors and friends in nature that we live with. And it's largely due to the forest that we have. We have lightning bugs, and they lay their larvae in the rotting forest. So it's important that we don't tear it down. Thompson's Woodland was developed after World War II, so one lot at a time. So the houses are each unique. It's not cookie cutter. We have space. We have so much space. Our roads were designed to be very narrow so the trees canopy the street, and we all walk in the streets with our dogs or just walk, and it's just the most magical neighborhood you can imagine. And I want you to remember that not all empty nesters want to live in a tiny plot with no yard. My 8 little grandchildren love it. They go on nature walks. They call my backyard a playground. Some of them call it a park. This is what surrounds that land. This is our home in our neighborhood. And this is what we want to be sure to preserve and maintain. It feels like you're living in the country right in the middle of the city. So I invite you to drive through and see it in person because it's unbelievable. We have even had a golden eagle in the backyard. Stunning. Not one sound from any other creature while it was there. We have goldfinch, there they are right there. Butterflies, dragonflies of different colors. It is so wonderful. And it's full of the indigenous oaks and junipers that are slow growing and add so much value to our property. And this is the kind of forest in this piece of property we're talking about. And we are homeowners, and that's what we'd like to see, is homeowners, and we would prefer that the lot sizes are more like ours. Thank you so much.
Just a minute. Do we have any questions of
Any questions?
Ms. Strickland? We're good, I think. Thank you.
Madam Chair, for the record, my name is Eric Groves. I'm an attorney, and I represent Thompson Woodlands Burr Oaks HOA, and we are allied with the other neighborhoods in the area. I want to talk about this application, and I want to say at the outset that we have talked about this, but this is still not ready to be approved. But it's possible for this application to be amended, revised, tweaked in a way that this project can succeed. We just don't think that it's ready yet, and we can't approve the design as it is now. Yes, drainage is one of the biggest issues and one of our biggest concerns, and we're going to talk about it here today. But it is far from the only issue that we have with the design statement and the master development plan. So how do we test the PUD application? Well, there's really 4 ways that we measure it. We look at the enabling statute that allows PUDs in the first place. We look at the PUD ordinance, sets out the requirements for PUDs. We look at the comprehensive plan, particularly Chapter 2, and we look at any other state or federal requirements that might apply. The state statute that allows PUDs, found at 11 Oklahoma Stats, Section 43-110, requires the integration of the PUD with characteristics of the area. As things stand now, that is not achievable with this PUD. You just saw representations of what the adjacent neighborhood looks like, and the applicant has given you an indication of what the project will look like. They're two different universes. They're different in terms of lot size, density, intensity of uses, and this PUD has to be structured in a way that it can be integrated with surrounding uses. We're not there yet. Let's talk about the requirements for a PUD under our local ordinance, 59-14100. The purpose of PUDs are to assure compatibility with surrounding land uses. This fails in that respect. That compatibility is not shown. If we look at Burr Oaks residential to the immediate east, Thompson Woodlands to the south, as I say, we have two different kinds of configurations. That's not to say that compatibility cannot be improved, but it doesn't exist as we see the project now. Also, of course, there's Mr. Watt's property. That's that little indentation off of Lincoln Boulevard, and he'll have to speak for himself, but there certainly is no compatibility between what he has and what would be built around him. Next, Section 14100.1, the PUD must provide for the conservation of natural features, natural topography, and the design statement as it stands now has only the broadest of generalizations, that they will, for example, preserve as many trees as possible. That's not what the comprehensive plan calls for. That's not what the PUD ordinance calls for. So it fails in that respect. Section 14100.2, subsection A, the PUD must minimize adverse effects upon surrounding property in terms of character, traffic. The traffic study identifies some issues, and it does put a light on Lincoln, which is really as much for the benefit of the developer as anyone else. There's no way that people are going to be able to get in and out of there without some modifications to the median, which would require ODOT's cooperation. So that traffic light is essential for the success of what they want to do. And there would be a right-hand turn at Northeast 50th and Lincoln, too, but we're not sure that this in and of itself is enough. We have not had an opportunity to consult a traffic engineer of our own. We would like time to do that. We need further analysis on that. This traffic plan contemplates the widening of Kelly. We don't know when that will occur or who will pay for it or whether it will ever happen. The CLO doesn't tell us. Probably not decided. But we think there should be some greater degree of certainty as to what's going to happen to Kelly before this PUD is approved. The ordinance also says at 14100.2E, PUD needs to contribute to the health, safety, and welfare of the community. Well, which community? Well, not this one, where the project is located. This does not portend any benefit for the people who live around it and could turn out to be a loss if it's not properly designed in terms of property values. The PUD ordinance that governs all this has requirements for a design statement, and I want to review those with you. At 14150, the ordinance requirement is that the design statement must describe phases and sequences to build the development. The design statement does not do that. Most design statements for PUDs allow development in phases. That's only natural. But our ordinance requires a description of those. In what order will these things be built? There's good reasons for wanting to know that. This will take a long time to build out, regardless of what uses actually go in there. But I think you all know what happens in situations like this. There's an enormous amount of truck traffic hauling materials, moving dirt around that will be on Lincoln and Northeast 50th and Kelly. We would like to be prepared for this. We would like to know what's going to come first so that we can deal with it. It's going to happen over a number of years, so that information has been left out even though the ordinance requires it. Now, at 14150, the design statement must include drainage information designating storm-water management methods. Now, I read that to mean you need a storm-water management plan. We don't have that, and drainage is a significant issue in this case, maybe the biggest issue, not the only issue, but a big issue, and some of the people who follow me will tell you of their experiences with stormwater in the area. The drainage study prepared by Tim, stand by please. That drainage study may be a good study for the purposes of the developer, but it's not enough for us. I think I made a copy of it's Exhibit 4. In your book, this is all the text there is. It's a page and a half, sort of an executive summary, and it says project scope, general discussion, methodology, and then a few remarks on the next page, a conclusion. Well, this is insufficient, we think. Now, for a while, whether there would be detention ponds or not has been up in the air. We weren't sure what Public Works would say. I think Tim's good for it either way. But if there is to be a stormwater management plan here, we need to know what it is. We want to know where the water is going to come from and where it's going to go, how much of it there's going to be, what velocity, and if there's going to be detention ponds, we'd like to know where they're going to be. We would like to be assured that the situation will not be worsened in terms of drainage. And right now, the whole idea is vague. And what I'm hearing from the applicant is, we'll let you know. We got to talk to Public Works, and there's developers who are going to be involved in this eventually. Well, that's not sufficient for our purposes. We believe that this can be done in greater detail than it has been right now. So, the ordinance also requires some other things that this application does not include. At 14150, there is a requirement for guarantees and assurances for perpetual maintenance of open space, drainage areas, and the like. This is important environmentally. The design statement speaks only of aspirational goals. There'll be maintenance by property owners or by an HOA or a POA. We would like the assurances and guarantees that the ordinance entitles us to, and what would be the nature of those. These are things that are usually done by covenant. There would be an HOA, as David said, for the residential areas, and a POA for the commercial areas. We would like to see what those covenants are going to provide, and although we don't expect to have them in exquisite detail, we think the design statement should require that certain provisions be filed of record as covenants as to what's going to be done. Otherwise, it's just speculation. Also, at 14150, the law requires that platting requirements be stated. Now, the way things stand now, the applicant wants to plat only single-family detached dwellings. We think all residential developments should be platted. We don't expect plats for the commercial area. And of course, we wanted the plat to be done contemporaneously with this PUD application. They have not agreed to that. They have reasons why they don't want to do it. But what is there about a plat that makes it so desirable for us? Well, it's a commitment. Plats have restrictions. They run with the land. They're not as easy to change as a PUD ordinance. And if we're not going to do a plat contemporaneously with the PUD, we would like some greater degree of assurance as to what these plats are going to say. Now, keep in mind that we do not favor apartments in this project at all. We agree that the designs advanced by Johnson and Associates are an improvement over the kinds of apartments we've seen in this city in the past. The big house concept we like. That's basically a quadruplex that looks like a big mansion, very attractive. But we think that those units should be owned individually as condominiums. The townhouses that have been discussed seem workable to us. They're aesthetically good looking. If they look like what's been done down at the Hill, that's a good look. But we want them to be condos. We don't want them to be rentals.
Mr. Groves, you realize that the city has no ability to restrict rental property. We cannot tell this property owner that they can't rent their property.
I'm aware of the law, Commissioner. But you have zoning authority, and you have authority over the development regulations in this PUD, and you can designate a tract for multifamily or not multifamily.
That's between a condo and a rental unit, whether it's owned or owned and rented.
I think there's a way to do that. I'm not going to bore everybody with details, but I think there's a way to do that. And I think it can be done through zoning. We need to remember that a PUD is a custom-designed zoning district, and it can be, the development regulations can be stated any way we can agree. So I think there's a way to do it. We can't tell an owner of real property, you can't rent it. That's true. But I saw some covenants not long ago for a project out in the west part of the city where the covenants restricted ownership for rental purposes of just so many lots.
You know also that the city has no ability to require restrictive covenants as a condition of our approval.
Well, here's what the ordinance says. And this is 14150B1A19. It says that the design statement should include guarantees and assurances for perpetual maintenance of open space and drainage areas. Now, how is that to be done if not by covenants? You know, that looks to me like...
Typically, we do that by requiring that property owners or homeowners associations be established to take up that requirement.
But homeowners associations are established by covenants, are they not?
As you know, Mr. Groves, we can't get involved in covenants.
Say again.
A covenant is a private agreement between the parties. It does not involve the city or the planning commission. If you and Mr. Box can get together and come up with some covenants, that's fine.
Well,
I don't think that's anything that the commission can require.
Then tell me how the commission enforces the requirement that there be assurances for perpetual maintenance of open space, if not by covenant.
Put it in the PUD.
We can do that. But it would have to be specific, detailed, enforceable, I think, for us to be satisfied.
I'd like to real quick, though, come back to a point you made. You are okay, and I want to check to see if the neighborhood, if you represent the neighborhood in this, you're okay with more density as long as it's owned, but you don't want renters. Isn't that what you said with the big house?
Yes, but let me clarify it a little bit. We anticipate greater density in this development than what the surrounding areas have.
Okay.
Okay? How dense is negotiable. The density of townhomes or big house apartments is negotiable. But what we don't want is underlying zoning that allows them to be what we traditionally call multifamily or rental apartments. That's what we don't want. That's a separate issue from density, I think.
Because you don't want renters.
No, we don't want apartment houses, and let me tell you why. Nobody wants them. This city, and I think you can all take notice of this, has a long history, and I've been there for it, where we zone land R4 for apartments. Apartments often were badly designed, fell into disrepair, bought by California investors, not maintained. You all know that. We're not talking about the people who live in the apartments. We're a diverse neighborhood. We don't care what kind of people live over here. We're worried about the business model of apartments is a problem. And I want you to think about this. If someone came along and said they want to put an apartment house next to your single-family detached dwelling, would you sign up for it? I don't think so.
Yes.
You would. Well, you're a millennial, Commissioner. I don't know.
Because, and I was going to say
But you'd
this,
care about the design of it, wouldn't you?
I will make this point now, although I was going to save it for the end. Just because it's single family in this area right now doesn't mean that you guys get to choose who gets to enjoy the same space as you. Renters have as much right to be there as anyone else. And to structurally prohibit the potential for multifamily structurally prohibits the potential for renters. And at least at the densities that I would like to see here, which I think is represented in the PUD. And to me, that is, it just comes down, it's classist. You're saying that we don't want poor people here.
Oh.
And I don't agree with that.
No, we'd be the last ones to say that.
That is what this sounds like to me. And
It's not.
unless
I'm telling
we
you
can
that it's
allow
not.
for renters, I won't feel good about that.
Well, we're not against renters. We're not against the people who rent property. It's the business model that I described that in this city has not worked out. Now, and you may feel that it's all right to have an apartment house next to you. You're a designer, you know, but I think you would expect it to look.
I live in apartments.
Good. But this is not the sympathy of most people in this city. It's not the sympathy of the people I represent. They don't want apartments. Most neighborhoods don't. But
To me, though, that on the one hand, the issues that you're raising are better addressed by those elements of the PUD that speak to the quality of the development, not to the density of the development.
well, I'm not finished yet, but I'm not really. Density is a negotiable matter with us, Commissioner. You know, we expect higher density here. It's not so much density as it is the experience and the business model of apartments in this city. Now, maybe we can get around that. You know, as far as the aesthetics of it are concerned, you know, what Johnson and Associates have come up with looks pretty good. But we've had bad experiences with apartments next to residential developments in this city, and there must be some way we can guard against the downside of these things. And one way we can do that is with zoning. Now, if we look at the master development plan, we know pretty much where single-family detached is going to go. We got to talk about that in lot sizes. And I take it the top part of Lot B may be the townhomes. Now, we like the look of these townhomes. If they're the traditional design, like row houses with alleys behind, people go down the alley and park their car in the back, but we'd like to see them be individually owned. And the same goes for anything else. Now, in Tract A, which would be mixed use, would include the wraparound style, such as the Edge. We don't have much of a problem with that. You have apartments upstairs, retail downstairs, the garage is in the center, it's a wraparound project. The aesthetics of that are not offensive. Density is arguable either way. What we have a problem with are renting the townhomes and renting the big houses. And this commission can make a recommendation that says, we're not going to do underlying R4 for these areas. We want something else. You have the power to do that. If it were our decision, this would all be R1, just like what surrounds it. We're not going to be able to make that deal, I don't think, with the applicant or with you. So we got to compromise somewhere along the way.
compelled to point out here, maybe I shouldn't, that, where we are in this application that's being presented to us today, as I understand it, is a compromise. This is not where they started off. This is not what they initially wanted to build. This is not the density that they were hoping for.
No.
But, they've changed lawyers and engineers and, come up with a whole new plan for the development of this property in response to the concerns of the neighbors.
That's the picture Mr. Box wants to paint. It's not entirely accurate. Not everything they've done was at our request. They're doing what they have to do to comply with the ordinance, and so some of it is not that gratuitous, is what I'm saying, Commissioner. They're
Does
not
that
doing
matter if it's
a lot
the
of
result
favors.
that you want?
Well, some of the things they've done we approve of, and we've made that known to them. But we still have a couple basic problems.
Let's hear those.
Apartments, and drainage, and the ESA, which I'm about to get to.
Well, because I can't help myself.
Okay.
Again, something I wanted to wait till the end to discuss on, but I knew was going to be brought up, and you just said it, which is, if we had our way, it would be R1.
Yep.
And to me, like, something that was in the video and was spoken about the video was that we are in a country oasis in the middle of the city. Well, I'm not going to go back and try to redo what happened, but to me that's a mistake. And it's a mistake because it's in the middle of the city. And I don't believe then that just because the lots are of a certain size and it's all home ownership means that we should be regressive in our approach to this new piece of property. And to say that it's R1 again in this area is, it's a mistake from the start to ask people to do that, because then when a neighborhood gets developed next to that neighborhood, we're going to have you back in here with those neighbors, and they're going to be screaming for R1. At what point does the city allow itself to grow?
Well,
are we only allowed to grow out? When are we allowed to grow up? And at what point can we create mixed neighborhoods that allow for a variety type of people to live in? What you're asking for, in my opinion, is against that, and to me it's against principles I stand for as a commissioner. So.
It may be against your vision, Commissioner. That's your vision, your outlook, your personal preference. You're an architect.
Well,
but let me finish.
Principles as a planning commissioner.
Okay, too, but what I'm trying to persuade you of is that just because you see it that way, or just because the planners see it that way, these folks don't see it that way, and these folks have their life savings invested in their property. That's why they're here.
Which is another good point that I will speak to very quickly. Some commissioners might care. I don't make decisions up here based on someone's home value. I don't think that's the way to do it. I don't think it's the right way to make the best decisions for everybody. And I would argue the fact that any of this development would impact home values, because I don't think that anyone could present credible evidence as such. But I also won't consider it, because I don't think it's fair to make a decision for the city based on an individual's home value.
Yet, we have law that says assure compatibility. Now, that may not be how you see it, but that's what's on the books. A PUD is supposed to be designed to assure compatibility. That's what the law says.
Mr. Groves, if I may,
yes.
I think that this does address compatibility. So I don't want to make this, it's not about my personal view. I try to be as objective as I can when I look at these things, and you do that by using and leveraging things like the comprehensive plan, the surrounding use pattern, development, infrastructure, all these things that the city wants us to look at when we make recommendations on land use items to City Council. And if you look at this, it's in the urban medium intensity, which specifically allows for balances small and medium lot housing and commercial districts. And if you read into that more deeply, this is the type of development that the urban medium would want to encourage. It's placing the commercial against an interstate, which you and I both know is not going to develop as R1. It's just not. So it's making great use of this land piece, and it constructs it so that it aligns the R1 and the residential uses against existing residential uses. I'm in agreement. The apartment thing, I have to point this out to you. You came to an Urban Design Commission meeting a few weeks ago, a month ago, I've lost track of time, and said, we want this included in the overlay. We want this whole tract included in the overlay. The overlay specifically encouraged commercial and multifamily development. It specifically encouraged it. Okay, wait a minute, let me finish. So what they've done here is they've gone away from what the overlay sought to create for this area, right, which is an increase in density, architectural review, except they've aligned the architectural outline of all of this development within that overlay. They've exceeded what we normally see, which I think is a credit to what they're trying to do there. A lot of people wouldn't do that. We see those applications. But I think it's a testament to that. And the other thing I'll say, I had somewhat of a rhetorical conversation with Chairwoman Powers in the sense that we sit up here and we read these reports and we get a lot of this stuff. I feel sorry sometimes for the citizens that come in because they don't understand how we're making these decisions, but I wanted them to understand that there was going to be a process to review drainage, and I really appreciate that she took the time to explain that this isn't the forum for that. So it's not that we're trying to ignore that issue or that we don't care or we think we've solved it. It's that this isn't the time to do it. These are pictures. As it develops, that's the city's job. They'll come back. We'll have these discussions, but that's not today. So that issue, I don't think is even within our purview, as she pointed out.
I think it is, and I think it is because the ordinance says it is, and I think I cited the ordinance.
I understand. I just think we're going to have to agree to disagree on what that ordinance asks us to do at this juncture of rezoning the property.
All right, well, let's get back to what we were arguing about. On apartments. I don't know how you feel about it. We're willing to compromise on this. You know, looks mean a lot when it comes to apartments. But as I've said, this application is half-baked. You know, we got to bake the other half. You know, we're not certain exactly which of these structures they want to be apartments. We don't have any commitment as to exactly what they're going to look like. And by the way, I remember I talked to Commissioner Hensley that day. We were at the Urban Development Committee, and I was arguing that we should include this in the overlay district. You know, Mike said, be careful what you wish for. You know, you may not like how some of those regulations work out. That was a good point, and I think you're saying that too, and I recognize that.
Would it be fair to summarize what you're saying to be that you believe that this application, that the hearing on this application is premature?
Yes.
Can we move on, please?
Yes, of course. I am saying that, though, the answer to your question. All right. We're not going to get a plat, but we do want to talk about lot size. The lots along the creek there opposite Burr Oaks would be 7,500 square feet. And David has made an argument that they're going to, you know, ordinarily they would go all the way out to the middle of the creek, but that the back of those lots is going to be subjected to common area maintenance. That's fine. But the fact remains the same. We're going to have smaller houses next to bigger houses. The average lot size in Burr Oaks is about 25,000 square feet. Now, I recognize that, Commissioner, that these things are going to be different, but surely there's a compromise in here somewhere that takes the 25,000 square foot lot and the 7,500 square foot lot and finds some kind of common ground. But that's a pretty radical difference.
I think he showed it to us. I think that the single-family detached homes that abut the neighborhood, I mean, unless that exhibit that we were shown is somehow incorrect, shows compatible lot sizes.
No, 7,500 square feet is not compatible with 25,000 square feet.
To the center line of the creek versus lots that are measured to the center line, to the edge of a 200-foot setback.
But, Commissioner, that applies only to the Burr Oaks homes that are on the creek. The rest of Burr Oaks is not on the creek, and they have big lots too, people across the street, for example. You know, the argument that David was making applies only to the Burr Oaks homes that are actually on the creek.
So if all of the development was developed as the single-family detached shown in this PUD, you would find the entire development compatible.
So I say again?
If all
If it was all R1?
Right.
Yes,
you would
of
find
course.
it compatible.
Of course. That's what we'd like to see. We're not going to get it, but that's what we'd like to see.
But you understand that if you can only develop R1 next to R1, the entire city is R1. At no point would we ever be able to do an R2 or an R3.
We recognize the inevitability of development, Commissioner.
What I believe that
asked
this
for-
does, and it shows in this exhibit, is that it is a gradual increase. And it increases across lots as we move in towards the development.
Yes, and that's all right with us. Graduated increases in density are all right with us. We still think 7,500 square feet is too small, and we don't really know about the density of the rest of it. This isn't specific enough to tell us.
I think you've made that point.
Yeah, let me
also.
get through.
Would you move on?
I will. Let me get through the rest of this. Section 14150, bunch of subsections, requires the master development plan to produce information concerning wildlife habitat. The master development plan doesn't do that. Not a word, nothing at all. And we'll revisit that in a minute when we talk about the ESA requirements. It also requires that the master development plan reflect proposed pedestrian paths, bike linkages. It doesn't do that. Now, oh, by the way, I want to get back to one thing Commissioner Highsmith said about the typology, the LUTA. You know, I think there's a distinction between a LUTA, which describes the characteristics of a particular area on the one hand, and zoning on the other. So I don't think we can say that we make decisions to conform to a LUTA necessarily. And the idea that we do troubles me. Anyway, Comprehensive Plan, Volume 2, page 90 et sec, says that the object, this is an environmentally sensitive area, ESA, and the object of that, it says, is to protect upland forests, especially cross timbers. The staff recognizes this, mentions it in its report, and then does nothing about it. Here's what the plan says. The development must strive to maintain as much cross timbers tree cover as possible, including the understory. The development must demonstrate how it will achieve the objects of that section. There's nothing in this PUD that addresses this, except this aspirational statement that we will preserve as many trees as possible. That is a generalization and is unenforceable. There should be information and a plan regarding habitat preservation, water quality, stormwater management. And the guidelines and best practices part of that section says it should be followed to the greatest extent possible, and if the object can't be achieved by the guidelines, then there must be a demonstration of how the development will achieve the objectives of the ESA. This is totally ignored. And when Ms. Strickland made her presentation, she showed butterflies and birds. This area is a habitat for a lot of different critters. We don't want to see it scraped. We are pleased at the concept of taking 40% of it and reserve it for open space. That's good. But we don't know where that 40% is going to be. We don't have any specific plans of how it's going to be maintained. We don't have any plans that show how mature existing trees are going to be preserved. That's why I say this isn't complete yet for your consideration. These things can be worked out. but it isn't there now, and it doesn't merit your approval without them. So, let me show you a few other things, if you would. Shannon, let me have that first one. Yeah, this is demonstrative, Commissioners. This is the subject property and what's proposed. And just in case there was any doubt, here's the 7,500 square foot lots, and here's the lot size of those homes and boroughs down here. I don't expect them to be exactly alike, but I think there's got to be some common ground between 25,000 square feet and 7,500 square feet. And it's not just the homes. Like some transition. Makes sense. This, by the way, is the actual original plat. If anybody has any questions as to the size of the lots, let's put that up there, if you will. This is their plan, of course. Now, this project will work if we can sit down and get down to details about what's going to go on up here. Are these going to be townhomes, big houses, or what? What's all this going to be down here? Where's the water going to come from, and where's it going to go? And I do think that this is the stage, because the ordinance says it is, to have a stormwater management methods must be part of this application. That's only what the ordinance says. I think it can all be worked out. I know that Tim Johnson is capable of doing all this. But we've got to have some flexibility here. We've got to be able to sit down and get down to details and work this out. So I don't want you to approve it today. You may. I'm just telling you there's a possibility for compromise, a design that everybody can live with, but this isn't it. And I think that you should ask the applicant and maybe the staff, what about the ESA? Why is that totally ignored?
Well, I'll speak, and I feel like I'm making all the arguments for the applicant here, but I'll speak to that as well.
Okay.
It is my opinion that our consistent fight against density in this city makes these areas environmentally sensitive. Because if you put a family under a home with this much parking lot and they're parking and their own, drive, that by nature means that each person is going to eat up more forest. And when we fight against density, we make areas like this more rare.
Make these areas what?
We make areas like this more rare.
Oh.
We tear down more forest by insisting on R1. Now, just because, I'm not going to make a decision today because the neighbors in this area like fireflies. To me...
Yes, they do.
Which is great. I like fireflies too. But to me, the developer has addressed it. I'm satisfied with the amount of forest we're keeping, and I'm usually the one up here that's fighting for the ESAs. So
I resemble that remark. You're not the only one up here.
I'm asking,
bring it up a lot.
I
mean, it's a common issue.
Here's my problem. I've got law that says this is an environmentally sensitive area, and here's what you got to do about it. That's what the comprehensive plan says. And this application doesn't address it at all. It's negotiable, but they say nothing about it. And yet, staff gave them a pass on it.
I think it's not quite accurate or fair. What they have done is set aside 40% of the land area for preservation of healthy, mature trees. That doesn't sound like much to you, perhaps, but I don't think it's fair to say it's nothing.
Oh, I'm not saying it's nothing. It's good. I just want to know where it's going to be and a commitment as to who's going to maintain it And are they going to keep the existing mature trees, or are they going to scrape them and plant new ones? That's what we want to know.
Well, it does say, to be fair, in the report from our staff, it says, the PUD states that existing healthy mature trees shall be protected to the extent possible and shall be included in subsequent specific plans.
That's not what the ordinance requires.
That's what the report says?
It's not what, pardon me, Commissioner, I mean, that's not what the comprehensive plan requires. That's just a general statement of we're going to save as many trees as we can. It's not what the plan requires.
What is your view of what the comprehensive plan requires?
I'll read it to you.
Oh, my God.
Or give you a copy of it.
No, just summarize it for me. Just summarize your perspective on what it requires.
Once an area is designated under the plan as an ESA, there are certain hierarchies that have to go through. And the first one is avoid doing anything with it. And then if you can't avoid it, then you got to mitigate it. But the object is to preserve as much of it as you can. And if you can't do that, then there are other possibilities. But what we have here is we have a vague statement. We're going to keep 40% of it as open areas. Which area? What trees? That's all we need to know. We need to get down to details with it.
You just said the same thing I did differently. It's because we don't know yet. This is a zoning application. And so what it provides for is that when they come back with specific plans and plat, those things can be discussed at that point. It's a premature argument. And for you to say that it's generalized, the statement you just made is general. It's because it's at the zoning stage. They don't know. They can't go out there and mark trees right now.
But you have an ordinance that makes this pertinent at the zoning stage.
Well,
you have an ordinance that...
Again, we interpret it differently. I think what they've done here is outline what they're doing. I think staff's reviewed it and is comfortable with it. And so for that reason, I'm comfortable with it as well.
I'm just telling you, they have not complied with the requirements of the comprehensive plan as to environmentally sensitive areas. What you think is sufficient, and maybe what staff thinks is sufficient, is not consistent with what the ESA section says.
Again, I think you've made that point.
Okay, I've made that point.
Are we done? Are you
Almost.
finished?
Almost.
Okay.
So, anyway, in conclusion, which I know you're glad to hear, we know this project is going to be developed. We know we have competent people to do it, Mr. Box and Mr. Johnson. But we want the maximum degree of compatibility that we can get. We want as much compliance with the comprehensive plan as we can get, as much compliance with the ordinance as we can get, and we don't think we're there yet. And we don't want you to, we can come back and support this thing if we can get down to details and make commitments and promises as to what's going to happen. And that's the nature of a PUD, and I think this is the right stage to do that. But if you approve it as it is, you know, we've still got a lot of issues with it. Now, can I answer any questions or have any further debates with any of you?
Anybody else want to engage? No? You know what? I think we're going to thank you, Mr. Groves.
We do have some other speakers.
I know we do, but I think we're going to take a short break before we launch into that.
Thank you for indulgence. When you come back, I'll introduce the other speakers.
I'll take 10 minutes.
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Groves?
ready when you are. Yes, our next speaker, I've asked these speakers not to be cumulative or repetitive, so we'll try not to rehash arguments. Shannon Washington, President of the Thompson Woodlands Burr Oaks Neighborhood Association.
Well, I guess I'll say almost good evening to everybody. We've been here quite a while. My name is Shannon Washington. I live at 4534 Woodland Drive here in Oklahoma City. I'm the Neighborhood Association President for Thompson Woodland Burr Oaks. Just a quick explanation as to why I purchased a home in that area. My wife and I looked for many years for a home to purchase, for us to set up our homestead. Many of us may be married, may have been married, or have dealt with a significant other who had a different idea of what was supposed to happen. My wife brought to me probably 300 houses in the first 10 years of us being married. Well, I'd say 7 years. And I'm a technical guy. I'm an IT and broadcast engineer. I said no. I analyzed everything. Nope, doesn't make sense. Till one day she brought that house to me on Woodland Drive. And I told her, she kind of looked at me puzzled. She didn't realize she would get that kind of response from me. So we went and looked at the house, and I said, yeah, let's do it. And we did what it took to get that home. We got that home based on the fact that, one, it gave us the ability to get anywhere in the city in about 10 minutes. Because we go right from 50th, right to I-44, we're on the highway. Two, it gave us space. Our neighbors were not right on top of us. Our lot is just right at an acre, and we had enough room to have family gatherings. It gave us the ability to we've had 30, 40 people at our house, and still not causing a traffic issue on the streets, because we have plenty of parking around our home. Three, it was the fact that, similar to what Carrie Hewlett had mentioned, her husband liked the country. She kind of liked the city. My wife likes the city. She liked the city. And I was a country boy. That was our compromise. My wife passed away last year. We fortunately had the ability to have a few family gatherings and other things in this home. And the general consensus of anybody that comes to the area, they love it. It's great. It's been a hidden gem. My wife had the opportunity to see when this initially came up in late 2015, beginning of 2016, when Jacobs Engineering was a part of this project, and they did engage us consistently. We had meetings with Jacobs, CLO, and things were going in a positive direction, and herself, she felt good about it. Now, somewhere in that process, communication broke down. Then, mysteriously, we find out that Jacobs had been fired. We didn't know why they weren't engaging us. We had no more meetings. We had no more communication. They were no longer engaging us. Then we find out that there was a PUD being filed all of a sudden. And we knew nothing about it. They didn't talk to us. Now, I'm not knocking anyone. Mr. Box himself, he's hired to do a job. Mr. Johnson, he's hired to do a job. And I respect that. But we purchased our homes understanding that we were going to be in an area that is safe. With what's going on with this PUD, we're looking at a complete change in our way of life. Now, my wife is gone, but I still intend on continuing to stay there and enjoy the area and what we have. When my kids come home, they'll have the opportunity to do so. But the way this PUD is the way things are looking, public perception, quite frankly, is the fight is already fixed. We know you all have great relationships. And we know we're just that one little bitty guy or those little people. You've made it clear that you don't really care about our property values. You don't care about our way of life. Now, that is your opinion, sir. And I respect that. You are allowed to have your opinion. But the fact that we don't have a planning commissioner, we don't have any true representation for our area, it's not fair. I understand that you all have a job to do, but we also understand that you all have a desire for growth and development in our state. I'm along. I agree with that. I believe in growth. But we want our wishes respected. We don't want to feel like you're just going to push something on us and then have us in a situation similar to what Edmond's going through with Coffee Creek. Coffee Creek, all these people purchased homes around Coffee Creek, paid a whole lot extra for those properties based on the fact that they want a golf course. The golf course is gone now, and there's a developer planning to do mixed use, just like this PUD, in that area. And those residents are not happy because it's going to negatively impact their property values, their way of life. Currently, what I live on Woodland Drive. I know every one of you are familiar with Lincoln Boulevard. And on Lincoln Boulevard, around 5 o'clock, traffic is so dense already that if I'm going home at 5 o'clock and I want to pull in my driveway, I stand the risk of being rear-ended every day with the people who cut through. When this development comes, it's going to impact us even worse. Now, none of you live there, so do you really care? Should you care? The way the community feels is we don't have representation that really echoes what we feel and what we know. Now, I understand. Again, this is progress. I'm not fighting progress. I don't think anybody in our community is fighting progress. But there's a way that we can find a good compromise that will be fair to everyone and still work and not negatively impact our way of lives. You talk about lot sizes. I disagree immensely with your point to saying that those lots adjoining Burr Oaks or right on the north of Burr Oaks along the creek are the same size. If you just look at it, there are approximately 11 lots on the Burr Oaks side of that creek. There's somewhere around 30 on the other side. Just from a common sense standpoint, that's a whole lot smaller than what we have in Burr Oaks. So that's a shell game that's being played on us, and quite frankly, we don't appreciate it. Now, I just wanted to give those points to you all. I understand you all, quite frankly, have your own opinions of what's going on. We've been here a long time, and quite frankly, I agree with every one of you. This has kind of been drug out a little bit longer than we all would have liked. But this is important to us. Now, as every one of you go home today, you're going to go to your own home, to an area that's not affected by what's about to happen here. But you all are the ones that's going to make a decision that moves us forward. And I would like for you all to take that into consideration because, again, we want to be treated the same way you would like to be treated. Don't take it as this is just an area that, quite frankly, is historically the northeast side of town is where all the garbage has been put anyway. The northeast side of town is where, historically, it's not been treated as well as anywhere else in the city. Typically because people in the community are not involved. They don't pay attention. And things just kind of roll on through. I'd appreciate you all if you just take just a moment to take consideration and put yourself in our own shoes. Because the purchase of a home is the biggest thing that anybody makes, in most cases. Now, of course, some of us are businessmen or women who may have made business investments that are a little bit larger. But the home is the most important thing and the biggest investment that most people will make in their entire lives. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Mr. Warrior.
get these set up here. Good evening. It's been a long day, I'm sure. I'm Xenophon Warrior Jr. I reside at 5712 North Lottie Avenue in Cashion's Wildwood Edition here in this area. What I would like to conclude with is talk a little bit about drainage here. As you think about the rain falling, today is the first day of the state fair. Everybody knows what that means. It means that the weatherman usually gets pretty busy, and every time we always get rain, I think it's forecast have rain this coming weekend. They have with this coming up with this. What I would like to talk about is the this particular area that we're talking about is being developed. It's been mentioned that it's a special and unique area, which I have heard some of the commissioners make the point they didn't know necessarily how special and unique it is. I would like to reiterate that it is only about, from this location right here, I'm about 5 minutes away from downtown. It's a very close to the core that we have this particular area. This is one particular development, 140 acres, that is being proposed being developed that has never been touched at all. It's virgin land in this particular area that's being occurring here. It's a very unique location with its topography, with all the various trees. The subdivision that's near is called Burr Oaks. It's called that for a reason. The neighborhood that I'm in is Wild Oaks, Wildwood. There's several subdivisions also have Wildwood names also because of all the individual trees that they have with it. It's a lot of rolling hills and quite a bit different, for example, in Ward 8, which is, I believe, very flat and a lot of farmland. And the farmers use every farmland, so they had to clear out all the trees, so there's not many trees in that particular area for this. This is a very, very, very nice, unique area. And I do believe that as our development has occurred here in Oklahoma City, there was a lot of suburbs that are being created. Many of the additions that was people living here in the center core of the city have gone out completely in various variety of suburbs we have here. That we've gone through that. During the time that our state was being formed in the early 1900s, I was remarkable that I was hearing the director of the History Center, his name Mr. Blackburn, I believe, director of the city. He was talking about the development of Oklahoma City as it occurred within this main area, within Main Street. And the one thing that was a big barrier as to development of which direction the city was going to be developed was water flow, concerning the Canadian River. Canadian River is south of us. None of the development was going to be able to go to the south of us because no one could get across that particular river. There weren't any roads at all, weren't any bridges. Matter of fact, the very first bridge that ever even developed was a railroad bridge before it even had some development with that. So everything was kind of moving toward the north with that. The Deep Fork River at that particular time was a very, very small stream of water in the early 1900s. It's now grown to be quite large with the development that's occurred within this area. It's a lot of water flow, and water produces a lot of energy as it flows down the individual area with this. With this various size of development, that Deep Fork River and the various creeks that feed into it have gotten larger and larger over the years with that. If you would look at this map, let me just kind of show you where we are right here. This right here is my particular neighborhood in Cashion's Wildwood. This is the subject division, the development that's located here. This is the Deep Fork River that goes through here. Here are some tributaries that come this area to the southeast of the development, and then also the east side of our development is another tributary that comes through this particular area that you have with that. So that's always kind of going through this. Now, this Deep Fork River is fed in by this over here. This is the water that comes from northwest, starts at about 39th and Ann Arbor, and feeds into this particular area. The Public Works has, over the years, to solve stormwater issues, to get water out of the streets, make sure it wasn't going to jump the curbs. Everything gets dumped into the Deep Fork River. The river and water is always going to seek its lowest point. So all this water is starting from the west, and it's coming back down here to the east in our particular neighborhood have with this. This has been continuously been more water dumped here over and over again, have with this, and this has continued to cause some problems in our particular neighborhood that I do want the committee to be aware of, is where we currently have issues concerning drainage that we have with this big area. No, this particular development is not the reason for that particular drainage issue, but this is something that does exist, and we want to know exactly where is this water going to go that's going to be produced by all these rooftops and all this various other concrete area that's going to be occurring here. They have this area. There is a particular issue and a problem we have right now with the Deep Fork Creek, and the tributary 16 is causing some problems that we have been in contact with the Public Works concerning that last year, and have not had any, have had some promises made, but not too much has been done with that. Over the years, our particular addition has been established in 1955. There has been some work on some of the drainage issues that affects our particular area about 25 years ago, but nothing has occurred since then. But more and more water is continuously getting dumped into this tributaries, and this is still continuously coming through our particular neighborhood. The other issue, as you look at this, you have water that comes down from this area. This is the area that is in Park Estates Edition. There has been a drainage box that's been produced, and it was actually constructed in the 1400 block of Northeast 50th Street last year, that's going to pump more water into this tributary that goes back behind the homes in our area of on Lottie Avenue. Have this area right here. That water goes up under, that drainage pipe goes under Northeast 50th, and then it feeds in behind the individual homes, that lowest area that's causing continuous erosion of a particular area that's occurring. That's one particular point we have here. We have another point here, this other tributary that's down this area. This is over in Thompson Woodland Edition that feeds into this tributary as it crosses Kelly. And there's another area that this particular area, water will flow down this area back behind our homes on Stonewall. This also causes individual problem with this. The biggest problem we have now that has been identified by the Public Works and also by the owner that owns about 40 acres of land near Grand Boulevard and 58th Street and Grand Boulevard. There's a bridge that goes over Grand Boulevard. That bridge has had some work done over the years. It can correct some drainage problems. It was more or less just kind of a patch problem that would occur with that. We've had a Public Works director that has come out to look at this particular problem that we've had, and he has recommended last June that the bridge is fine. It doesn't need to be replaced, but there is a lot of blockage of a lot of debris that gets trapped up under the bridge, and then it causes the water to backflow back into our particular neighborhood. So if you look at that area right here, this is our particular neighborhood, lowest area here. The issue that we're having with the homes that are on the Stonewall side is that the water that it gets stopped and cannot flow and get out of that channel, that tributary channel, quickly enough because of the blockage that has occurred at Grand Boulevard and 58. It starts backing up and starts erosion that occurs along those homes in the back. And it more or less, the water starts whirlpooling. When it gets to a point where it tries to make a curve or it gets to a point where water can't go out quick enough after the channel, it starts whirlpooling. That whirlpooling action causes the channels to be erosion to occur and more erosion to occur with that particular area, with that. Now, we've been waiting since June. They were told that the Public Works Director had said that that particular job of cleaning out the blockage at Grand Boulevard would have to be done by an outside entity, but they were going to go ahead and hire someone to get that done. It still hasn't been completed. That's been occurring with that. During that at the same time also, last year I did have the public director or public works engineer. Two of the engineers came out to our particular property and made a tour of the drainage problems we have in our particular neighborhood last June. They did tour the various property. They took pictures of it. At that particular time, they said, well, they had no idea there was that much of a problem. We're having erosion of these various tributaries that are going through our neighborhood that's caused that particular problem with that. They would go ahead and look at that and then would write a report as to what's going to be done or what their outcome or what their just a discussion about the terms of our drainage concerns will be discussed with that particular letter. Now it says I have right here March 26 in 2018. One of the public works engineers, I believe he was here a few minutes ago, Jared Norris. He did tour our area along with Michelle January is the other engineer. He toured our property in June of 2017 of the problems that we have in our particular area. I took him over to look over altogether about 9 different locations that we had some erosion problems because of the tributary area that's coming from this Deep Fork River. But he said this, he said, last June we visited several locations about drainage concerns. Can you provide me an address of each of the locations we visit? I will need to respond to each one individually. I did that the same day on the afternoon of March 26th, and here we are in September. We still haven't received, there was a resident still not received a letter concerning what their findings were concerning their particular drainage issues that were being discussed with that. So I'm kind of perplexed as to, I'm not sure how this drainage issue is going to be addressed that's going to be occurring once this particular development is completed with this area right here. They're basically saying that, well, we'll work on it later. We'll decide on how we could take care of the water later on. But I would like some clarification and actually a plan in place as to where is all these millions and millions of gallons of water going to go that's going to get dumped into this Deep Fork River Basin. That's eventually going to go back into this area. As water goes to the particular area here, if it can't flow quickly enough, it starts backing up into these little tributaries until it can eventually flow on east out of the drainage channel for that area. But now you're going to have more and more dumped into an area that's already experiencing some erosion problems now as it stands with the particular area. There has not been any type of, that I've seen any concrete plan of dealing with the stormwater that's going to be dealt with, that we're going to be dealing with once this particular development, and if it is developed, this particular 140 acres of land is located here. So I would hope that the commission would, if you are not going to deny this application at this particular time, that there would be something put in place that would be a plan that would be set up as to how we're going to deal with stormwater as this particular development occurs, because it is going to create millions and millions of gallons of water. There's going to be some more water even dumped into this area over this area when the ODOT finishes draining off the water that's going to be at the Interstate 235 near Northeast 50th Street. As some of you may realize, I probably know that Broadway Extension has a lot of times will flood before that construction work they're doing. That's one reason why they're widening the street and also dealing with the water that pools and stands around Northeast 50th and Interstate 235. So they are preparing to take some drainage pipes to drain water and dump it into an already pretty significantly amount of water that's already coming into this Deep Fork River Basin, this big area with that. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you. Are we finished, Mr. Groves? I think I have another 1 or 2 people signed up to speak.
Those are all the people for our presentation, Commissioner.
Okay. Rebecca Kaufman. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Edwards.
I'm George Edwards. I own 5909 North Kelly Avenue. I'm the feller that owns the bridge that goes to nowhere. To give you a little history of this property, I have 67 years of experience on the subject property. Back in the 50s, we had hole water. Anybody know what hole water is? Hole water is when the water stands and has no flow on Deep Fork. 8.5 miles or so to the west is the headwaters of the Deep Fork River, 39th and Ann Arbor, coming off an apartment complex. And that's just by the Crow. As this comes down, the crooks and bends help slow that. By the 60s, we started to have a little bit more flow. We had quite a bit more flow. In the mid-60s, ODOT declared the Northeast Expressway, wanted to change it to I-44, limited access. At that point in time, our entrance, ingress and egress, was off at that point the Northeast Expressway. So in the 60s, ODOT cut our entrance off. We have one ingress and egress, the subject bridge. By the 70s, we had further increase because of upstream development. And it's getting higher and higher. By the 90s, we started to see some erosion issues. By 2004, I started to focus on this subject area. Remember, we had a bridge built. And water is energy. And every time more water goes in to a confined area, the energy increases. That force increases and is very destructive. So by 2014 and 15, the energy was so strong, Oklahoma City went and they had constructed a retaining wall because Kelly Avenue was in fear of sloughing off into the river. Then, with that work, they changed the course of the river, changed the energy with that. Our family has always, historically, we've been here since 1889. We've always tried to do what's best that we could for the community. But the river started to change. And with that change, the topography changed. What happened? The river, the vortexes that Mr. Warrior was referring to, increased. And with that, the erosion increased. To the point that the water came down. The water came down and hit Oklahoma City's support structure for a 42-inch sewer line. That created a vortex. And with that increased upstream development in water and energy, all of the riprap eroded, and I have pictures of it. In addition to the riprap that went, then the concrete apron underneath that subject bridge went. Now there is no protection, and the upstream continues to rise. All of the soil is now eroded at that point. The steel girders are exposed. Cobb Engineering came out and condemned the bridge. Condemned it. Only thing that can go across it is a pickup or a car. It's getting worse. So what happened? in 14 and 15, that sewer line failed. What happened? Hydrogen sulfide gas is part of sewage. I'm a certified wastewater operator, and I have to, as a responsible operator, I have to report problems. We finally had the failure of the sewer line. We had geysers of raw sewage blowing up in the air. So at that point, you had to do something. You had to replace the line. And a contract was set out to inspect and do something. I'm getting there.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not, we both know I can talk.
I think the history is interesting. But
And what is it, how does it pertain to this?
What we would like to know is whether you have something pertaining to the application
Yes.
in front of us that you
Yes.
think we need to know.
Yes, that's what I'm getting. The energy is getting to a point where we're having tremendous erosion. Every rain we have erosion. I've looked at the 80 acres that's to be developed, and I did some calculations. 1 inch rainfall on that 80-acre tract, which is based on 60/40, is 2.1 million gallons of runoff. 2 inches, do the math.
Yeah, I went to law school, so I wouldn't have
Right.
to do math.
Right. With the detention ponds, that would be very beneficial to require that, to have valves and detention structures to hold that water back and hold all that until 24 hours later and release it. That would certainly help. The bigger issue we've got, though, is a 96-inch line coming off of ODOT at 235. My property, from some of your own maps, is showing more and more of it being in a floodplain. We've already seen in 2010, with that flood, I had water coming up the steps, and that was a 35-foot rise on Deep Fork. A 4-inch rain, like June 7, it came up 19 feet. How do I know? I measured it once the water went down on that subject sewer pipe. We've had 2 rains of 4-inch, both times it came up. The last one that we just had last week, I've lost over 25 feet of bank since June 7, 24 feet east and west, 25 feet north and south, and the last one just last week, I lost another 15, 20 feet. The energy is there. It has to be harnessed. And if we have detention structures on the development with valves to hold that back, that will help. But as previous people have said, Deep Fork River is a dumping ground. It's now gotten to the point where I'm losing my property. Is that fair? Is that fair, that I should lose property?
I don't know how to answer that question for you.
What would you do?
What can you do? I mean, when there's soil erosion that's caused by flooding.
Where is the water coming from? Upstream development, correct?
So we should stop development.
Huh?
So we should stop development.
I didn't say that. I'm not suggesting that. What am I suggesting is improving the retention of stormwater to hold it back so it can be released in a better time shortly. Water is free if it's in a detention facility. It can be used for irrigation.
What, weren't we told that detention is required here?
But nothing was mentioned regarding structures. I worked on detention ponds. I just did one a week ago. There's an influent pipe and an effluent pipe, but no way to hold it back and keep it there. It's a straight pass-through.
I think, again, this is part of a discussion that will be had at an appropriate step in the process, But the zoning is not that step.
No, I understand that. I'm just addressing this situation, and that's all. I'm not opposed to the development. I think it would probably be a good development and good. It's the gateway to the state capitol. Our families always try to do what's best. And yes, it's very unique. We've had Whitewater come to us. We've had golf courses come to us. We've turned them down. But this looks like to be, in my opinion, a good development for the whole overall area. My only issue is drainage. That's all I've got.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. That's the end of my list of folks who are wanting to be heard. Commissioners, discussion?
I'm ready to make a motion. But you guys know what my motion's going to be, so if you guys want to discuss this further.
I'll have a few comments before a motion, but I was jumping the gun a little bit, I guess, maybe. But so I feel like often we ask developers to work more with the neighbors and come back later. My first few meetings, I feel like we did that a lot. Now, I suppose a lot has occurred, and there have been several meetings. I'm not familiar with those meetings myself and what compromise might have occurred. I don't think the property owners invited me to any of those meetings. I hope I wasn't just ignoring them, but maybe it's because I'm not in Ward 7. But I don't know what occurred there. It seems there appears to be a desire for some additional compromise, or a desire by the neighbors, of course, I mean, at least for some compromise. A lot of different individual items have been gone through. The drainage, I think what I've understood is that's for a later time when it's platted. I don't think it's a zoning issue. The trees, I think it was a good compromise, the 40% open space, but I can't quite tell. Actually, I'm sorry, I meant to start with a couple questions, and then I'll conclude. On the technical evaluations, I heard you say, David, 1 and 2 agreed to, number 2 is not. What about 4?
We agree to 1, 3, and 4. We don't agree to 2.
Okay. So 2 is the only one that's not. I don't understand why not number 2. Maybe I don't understand the technical evaluation itself.
So what staff is asking us to do in number 2 is not send notice when we have the specific plan.
That's the way I read it. I didn't understand why the city would not want them to send notice.
It's just based on the legal requirement. When we notice for zoning applications, we do not do a secondary notice for the specific plan application, but we're going to work out a way that we can work with the applicant to do that.
Okay.
And the reason being the city takes its, direction from the state statutes require notice on zoning and platting. It's silent on, I don't know if specific plans even called out in the statute.
Okay, but you're refusing, it's kind of circular, you're refusing to delete the requirement that the city send notice?
No, we are asking that the city be forced to send notice.
Right. Why, and why do you insist that notice be sent? Why not agree with the TE?
By agreeing to the TE, notice is not sent.
Right. Why are you not okay with that?
I'm not okay with that.
It probably should.
But why is the applicant
The
not okay?
TE should probably just be modified to read that notice will be provided for the specific plan.
Right.
Okay. There we go.
That's
okay.
what we desire to keep the neighbors informed.
Okay. Okay, so the TE should be changed to say notice will be given, and then you would agree to the TE.
We delete the TE because the PUD as drafted requires notice to be sent on the specific plan.
Okay. Madam Chairwoman, we have, at least on this issue, Ms. Hewlett wants to speak.
Sure, come forward, please.
And I really appreciate the applicant taking that position. The PUD, as stated, says, I believe it's to owners within 300 feet. So the specific plan, once you start getting into these commercial areas, those owners, I don't know who they're going to be.
It'll be from the boundary of the PUD as a whole.
Okay. What we would like to do is add that it also goes to the officers of our neighborhood associations. Because we are, all these issues that we're passionate about are going to be deferred until there's a specific plan. So our concerns are like later. We want to be sure that we are notified so that we can participate, since it looks like most of these are not going to be addressed.
I have a hard time believing that that wouldn't be.
I don't know how I can agree to do that. I don't know. I can agree to send an ownership list because it's publicly available data. I don't know that I can agree that at some point in the future, I'm going to be able to track down who happens to be the particular president of an HOA.
We would provide that information to you.
That
We could put
changes.
that. I know, but we could keep a list.
I think that may be a bridge too far, Ms. Hewitt.
And I would just say, I've never heard an applicant be willing to give notice. They're not required to give other. I've never
And
heard
I
this.
told you, we really, really appreciate that.
Yeah.
But, you know,
I respect the concern, and it would be great if there was a mechanism to do it. It's one of logistics. It's just a reality.
I make a suggestion. Maybe if you could designate somebody in your neighborhood that would be noticed to notify whoever the current HOA president is for each neighborhood.
that's
That might
what I'm
work.
thinking. We could have a mechanism that we could agree to.
Right. We're just saying that you can't put that on David.
Oh, no,
to
we
have
would
to do
give
that.
him, make it easy for them.
Well,
What I think
I'm saying is somebody within Burr Oak's probably a good place that will definitely get noticed, that they can pass on the information and not.
Yeah, because the problem is there could be a point in, say, Tract A that is 30 years from now that they come before the commission for a specific plan. So how in the world would we be able to track through 3 decades who is supposed to get noticed? Other than,
I think that's
Yeah,
not
Ms.
reasonable.
Hewitt, I'm afraid, that we can't trust, not every HOA is good and formal and organized, you just never know. There could be a small HOA, they can't find it, I'm just sorry. I think what's required, they give notice, we'll absolutely have to give notice, but hopefully the members of the HOA will make sure that the head of that HOA get the notice, but I
Mr.
don't know how
Warrior, did you have something you wanted to tell us?
Thank you. Maybe I can think of something as a compromise. Yeah, with that, if the applicant's attorney would agree to that, we've been informed and had an opportunity to have some engagement about this development along the way, because I believe that they had employed a person that actually is a community leader that would advisors such they were using it the last time was Michael Owens, that would be contacting the individual property HOA presidents to go ahead and organize a time in which they could assemble the various property owners of the OHA to address and discuss anything that's going to be that's going down the line as things would occur with that. Would you be in agreement to continue doing that as you had done in the past, or is that something that Mr. Johnson had arranged?
so as long as I'm involved in this project, absolutely. Again, part of the problem becomes, at the time that it gets developed, it may be a developer that chooses not to hire me or chooses not to hire Johnson. And so all we can do is, in the PUD, put so many requirements in place that whoever it is that is going to develop has to send notice to as wide of a swath as possible. And I think we've done that through the way the PUD is written. I don't think it's legal to even commit that certain people will be involved, because I could walk out of City Hall and get hit by a bus. So all we can do is send notice pursuant to the boundary of the property.
I think I'm ready to move on. I think there's required notices, and they'll keep sending the required notices. I'm sorry, I just was confused by the refusal. The TD was circular, so now that we've
Cut it
clarified,
backwards.
they will send out the notice to who's required to receive it. I'm ready to move on, okay. I should have started with that one just to clarify before I went through. So the rest of this, density, Mr. Box did a good job of explaining how close those two are, but the picture to the right, it's a lot different. That's not to say you can't have smaller lots next to bigger lots, but that is an issue of dispute still, that we often listen to neighbors on whether it's too drastic of a change, whether it could be more gradual. The trees, actually I did bring it up you say you agree with TE4, but so the specific plan is later? The specific plan must include areas of tree preservation, so that's a later stage?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I intended to end where I started, which was often we ask the developers to work more with the neighbors. I heard, I know it's been a while, but this is a really big, important piece of property. And these neighbors, several of them, different associations, want more discussion and potential compromise. I would love for them to leave here, Commissioner, a future meeting where the protesters are saying, you know what, we're there. We've done that several times. We said, work together, and they come back and they say, the applicant and the neighbors have agreed and we're ready to move on. They're clearly not there yet. So if I'm against it, it will be because I think that continued encouragement that we often do is, I think, could be potentially helpful.
So 2 things. There have been 10 meetings on this. The last 2, if not 3, have been an hour and a half about drainage. And if there were specific things in terms of design or uses, then they hired competent counsel who could have sat down and asked to sit down and go through the details that they want to see. We've continued it for 10 months, and we've had 10 separate meetings. I'm confident to say that additional meetings, there is never going to be a time when we walk into these chambers saying we did it. Now, with that said, I'll meet once a week, twice a week, whatever it takes between now and council. If there are specific things that they believe that we can tweak, fair enough. But over the course of the last 10 meetings, I don't see where that is.
There are places we can tweak, but if you approve it, we lose leverage, bargaining leverage. If the thing needs to be marked up, pinned down, problems resolved, these meetings that David's talking about, I don't know if there were 10 of them, I didn't go to 10 of them, amount to gripe sessions, where folks sit around and express their concerns, where what has to be done is where Tim and David and me and the representative or scientist sits at a table and figures out how to get the right language in this design statement. That can be done, but if you approve it, what motivation do they have to do that? I mean, between here and council, doesn't give us any bargaining power. I think it can be done.
Well, it's maybe going to pass and move on, but if it doesn't, because of this encouragement to work together, and I know the applicant will not appreciate that, but I would hope that any future meeting would be really focused. If the drainage, I understand the issues, but there's been so much focus today that if there's that much focus in those meetings, I think maybe the rest is getting lost, because drainage is important, but it shouldn't be the overrider. That is a future stage, if I'm understanding it. And to one of the gentlemen, my granddad owns a farm on the river, and he loses land all the time. It is what it is. If you buy property that abuts water that moves, it erodes, it happens. So I understand that drainage is important, but the city will develop. There is a creek, there are tributaries, but if you guys will focus on the other issues I've heard, then maybe there would be progress. But I
do want to focus on the other issues. I identified a whole bunch of issues. Drainage is just one of them. And drainage is solvable. I mean, Tim can solve it.
But I think they can too, so I hope not too much being wasted on the drainage argument, so I think it'll be solved.
We've got all these other things we're concerned about. I made that clear.
I think I would say to you that, I do not believe that there is short shrift being given to the concerns of the neighbors here. I think there have been meetings upon meetings about this. I think to suggest that there has not been an opportunity to sit down and mark up is not quite credible. I do not think, and you won't hear me say this very often, I do not think that additional meetings are going to move the needle on this application. So, anybody else? Comments, questions, concerns?
I would say that certainly there are some differences between the character of this property and the character of the surrounding neighborhoods. I think, but I also think that there's 2 arterial streets, to me, or 50th Street is an arterial that, other than Burr Oaks, somewhat provides a barrier between this subject property. Not somewhat, it is a barrier. It's a 40-mile-an-hour street that provides a separation, if you will, between certain of the neighborhoods that have been spoken about today. And I think that's a focus. But I also am thinking about the benefit to Ward 7 with respect to this. And I'm looking at Tract 8. This is potentially the largest commercial development that has come across in my time on this planning commission. 58 acres of new commercial in Ward 7 it's a big deal. I mean, it's important. It's important to this ward. It's important to the city for this sort of development to come into Ward 7. I've officed at Central Park and looked across at this property for years and said, what is going on here? Why hasn't this developed? This could be meaningful. I think this is a meaningful development for Ward 7. I think it's a huge development for Ward 7. And it's not necessarily just the size of it, it's what it is. And I think that maybe it's not all there, maybe it's going to take some tweaking over time, but I think it's an important event. It's an event for Ward 7. And I think that the people who have gotten it to this point have done a pretty good job, and I don't know that it's going to get any better. Maybe it will as we develop and things get fleshed out. But I can't minimize the importance of this for the city and for that ward. This is huge. This is just huge. And I'm not personally going to be one that wants to stand in what I consider a very progressive and very important thing for Ward 7. And I don't live in Ward 7, clearly. But if I lived in Ward 7, I would be backing this development. And it may be tweaked. There may be some things that can be done between now and council, but I don't know that we're going to get them agreed, frankly. But I think the council will recognize the importance of what the ask is here. So I think we need to focus on some of the potential realistic benefits that are available in this development toward 7. And it's going to be a long development path, but frankly, I'm excited. So there's things that we could work out maybe, but I don't know that we're going to get them worked out. So I think it's time to move this on. And the parties have had ample opportunity to discuss particulars. As Janice has said, I mean, June 20th, I know, Eric, you've been involved for a while. And so there's been opportunity to say, okay, gee, we're going to have this. Let's maybe tweak here, tweak there. So I think we need to move this on, personally.
I was really quite moved by Mr. Washington's comments today, and I may be the least development-friendly person sitting around this horseshoe. I'm not sure about that, but the neighborhoods of Oklahoma City are really my passion as a planning commissioner. And I am familiar with and really love the little neighborhood. Not Burr Oaks quite so much. It's kind of tucked away. It's really sort of closed off, but the little neighborhood south of 50th there, it has wonderful wandering streets, and it's a lovely area to drive through. I always drive very slow. And in fact, I've looked at homes for sale over there and thought about moving over there myself. And I say that only to say that, as I was looking at this proposal, this application, there were things about it that concerned me. And I have raised those with the applicant, and I've had them answered. The issues with respect to drainage, we're not at a place to make those decisions yet. There are still a few issues with respect to traffic that will have to also be made once the actual nature of the development is more specifically defined. But the parameters within which those decisions will be made, have been addressed to a level that I'm comfortable with. I very foolishly at one of our neighborhood meetings offered to be a surrogate for your Ward 7 planning commissioner. And I realize now that that must have sounded very hollow to some people. But frankly, I can say very honestly to you that if I thought that this development was going to be a detriment to Ward 7 as a whole, to the neighborhoods that surround it, or to the city of Oklahoma City, I would not vote for it. I do think that there are issues with it that remain to be resolved, as there are with virtually any development, and certainly one this size, and one that will develop over time. And that's just a fact that we have to live with. But again, the things that I look to, and that checklist is fairly long for me with respect to a development like this, have been responded to and answered in a way that I'm comfortable with at this point. And I, frankly, am in favor of this application. So I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to recommend approval of the application to City Council.
You need to delete TE2.
Deleting TE2.
And was that a second, Mr. Gravens?
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 16, deleting TE number 2. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved. We'll give people just a minute to remove their exhibits and So what did I do with my agenda? Commissioners, do we have any additional items? Communications and reports. Planning Commission committees. We don't have any Planning Commission members. Anybody have anything they want to offer up?
I'll just share briefly. I attended an inner-city chamber visit in Sacramento this past weekend. There were several folks there, city officials and business leaders and others. It was a chance to kind of share ideas with their community. We heard a little bit about their comprehensive plan, which is called Blueprint. I'll tell you, there was a lot of thought-provoking things that occurred there, things that gave me a little bit of perspective from a different city that were real takeaways for me and gave me some things to think about. I would just encourage you all, if you have a chance to attend something like that, it's great perspective to step outside of what we see with our own comprehensive plan in our own city, with our own developments in our own wards, and see problems from a different viewpoint. So if you ever have a chance to go and it works, I would really encourage it. I thought it was very beneficial. So it changed the way, frankly, that I thought about some things. So it was helpful. It really was. So.
And I think you should go check out that Blueprint plan, because their planning process was 15 years ago, and they followed a lot of the same practices that we did with our comprehensive plan, with growth modeling and fiscal impact analyses and things like that. So for 15 years, they've been measuring the impacts of growth against changing policies about development. And that's a pretty remarkable thing, since we're only 3 years into our plan. to look back 15 years, it's going to be kind of neat projecting another 12 forward to see where Oklahoma City will be.
Yeah, and that plan was voluntary, which is kind of interesting, but it's held, and it's held through community outreach. There were a couple of things there that were said in reference to our plan that were just simply not true. And frankly, in comparing the two, our plan is vastly superior to the work that they did, but it's the continued communication that's helped it succeed. So that was the takeaway in that regard for me, too. So great job.
Thanks for sharing. Planning Department, Development Services, Municipal Counselor, citizens to be heard. If I got anybody left?
Wait a minute. I was told that my light wasn't on the vote for that, but I want to be clear for the record that I voted for the application on 16. Okay?
Thank you. This is other business. I never know what that means. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. We're out of here.